Good evening and welcome to the Littleton Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, September 24th. I'll read through our proposed agenda. At 6:30 we have organization, pledge of allegiance, read the mail. 6:35, various town boards and departments to discuss a number of topics, including vacancies on a couple of elected boards, Housing Authority, Library Trustees. We have our town's representative to the Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee in here to discuss special municipal employee designation, appointments to the Cultural Council, police dispatch appointments. 6:55, the October 29th special town meeting. We have to finalize the warrant, determine order of articles, direct the posting, and adopt recommendations as we see fit. 7:25 was scheduled for public input and members' updates. 7:30, a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and School Committee to discuss fiscal 2020 budget guidelines and priorities. At 8 o'clock, we have a public hearing on the layout of a public way, Foster Street from Taylor Street to Howard Avenue. At 8:15, a discussion of the MS4 stormwater update, file the notice of intent. At 8:30, Town Administrator, Assistant Town Administrator, Community Compact Cabinet grant opportunities, and at 8:45, minutes approval. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you lead us in the pledge?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right. Keith, would you take us through the mail packet? I think it's pretty skippy this
Sure,
week.
Yeah, I just had one new thing in the packet, and we'll start with, well, it's not that it's old, but it hasn't happened yet, and that is the open house at the police department is this Saturday, September 29th at 11. I had this in the PowerPoint from 2 weeks ago, and just figured I'd put it up again for to get the information out. And the only other thing in the packet was the Massachusetts Municipal Association will be having a series of legislative breakfasts starting on Friday, October 12th, and the one closest to us is in Framingham. That's it.
All right. On to the town boards and departments, the vacancies. Keith, you want to walk us through that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we had received notice of a vacancy on the Housing Authority, and Margaret Larson resigned effective September 12th. We received notice from the remaining members of the Housing Authority in a timely fashion, and that they wish to participate in the joint appointment, which is possible by them giving you prompt notice. And so there's a procedural vote on giving notice back to them, scheduling a date for a joint meeting, and inviting applications. And typically we invite them for a month. Applications are open to registered voters, and we are able to have a month's time open and to put it on the agenda for your first regular meeting in November, which is the 5th, Monday the 5th.
Have you had that conversation with the director of the Housing Authority?
Yes, yeah, and with the and she has returned a notice signed by a majority of her members. We can offer 7:15. Again, first come, first serve, I guess. The Housing Authority joint meeting could be at 7:15 that night, and the next item that we'll get to with the library trustees could be at 7:30 that night.
Okay. Do we know whether or not they've got anybody on their radar screen? Or?
I don't know that they do, and typically it's often been write-in.
Right.
Candidates for the Housing Authority.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
if
Well,
you're interested.
yeah, right. If anyone's got any interest, or board members have any recruits? Unless there's any discussion on this, I'll welcome a motion.
certainly move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 11, to receive the notice thereunder given by the remaining members of the Littleton Housing Authority of the vacancy on said board created by the resignation of Margaret Larson effective September 12, 2018, And further, to give notice to said remaining members that the Board of Selectmen shall convene a joint meeting with the intent to fill said vacancy through May 2019 annual town election by joint appointment to be made on Monday, November 5th, 2018, at 7:15 PM. And further, to invite qualified registered voters of the town of Littleton to apply for said appointment and to be interviewed at said joint meeting.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Similarly, Keith, the library trustees, and I see we got at
Same
least one
song,
library
second-
trustee here.
Yeah, same song, second verse.
Oh, two, it was, I'm sorry. Three, yeah, like, oh, something's in here I didn't notice. I'm sorry, Keith.
Yeah, we subsequently received a notice of a resignation on the library trustees, Katie Caruth, effective September 18th. So we're going to follow exactly the same procedure. We got a notice back from the remaining members of the library trustees, the majority of them, which is enough to have them participate in the joint appointment. So in both of these cases, we'd established a deadline of Wednesday, October 31st at noon for receipt of applications. And that's because Wednesdays work for our getting an agenda packet out to the board on Thursday. So we've been doing that lately. And would also be interviewing on Monday, November 5th at 7:30 for the library.
Guys have anything to add to that, commissioners?
No.
We'll see you again on the 5th, and if you have anybody, let us know, otherwise it's open to anyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to read the long one again, or do you want someone else to,
It doesn't matter. Chuck, I think Chuck wants to read
Move
it.
that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Master Law, Chapter 41, subsection 11, to receive the notice thereunder given by the remaining members of the library trustees of the vacancy on said board created by the resignation of Catherine Caruth, effective September 18, 2018, and further to give notice to said remaining members of the Board of Selectmen shall convene a joint meeting with the intent to fill said vacancy through the May 2019 annual town election by joint appointment to be made on Monday, November 5th, 2018, at 7:30 PM, and further, to invite qualified registered voters of the town of Littleton to apply for said appointment and to be interviewed at said joint meeting.
Second.
okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any-
Fast talker.
It's an auctioneer to decide. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
And then there are the two notice orders for the
Okay.
chair to sign.
Great.
Those off.
And I know we've got, Charlie, you want to come up front here? And Keith, do you want to maybe give us a little background on what this topic is all about?
Sure. The next item is a request from the Neshoba Valley Technical High School District Committee, requesting that, they actually are requesting that all of the boards of selectmen in the district appoint their representatives to the district school committee as special municipal employees under Chapter 268A. What I've included in your packet is the letter that we got from the district chair, our own representative, Charlie Ellis, along with an excerpt of the agreement, which indicates that we get one member and one alternate for Littleton, and a list of all of the special municipal employee designations that have been made by the Board of Selectmen, just for your reference. And also included some background information about special municipal employee. So, so Charlie's here to tell
Yeah.
us.
Keith, you'll recall a couple of months ago when we met, that was a topic that I was hoping we would cover at some point this year. Just
Yeah.
the whole notion of, I've never been able to grasp, what are we doing when we create special municipal employees, and more importantly, or equally, how different would the world be if we weren't doing this? I mean, it's,
Well, I'd say that it's, I guess I'd ask for Charlie to
Yeah, okay,
explain
well,
what their problem is that can only be solved by this.
right, all right, so,
Well, in a perfect world, Mr. Chairman, I think you're right, but there's such a thing called the Ethics Committee,
right.
and they supersede the perfect world. So
How does it affect the position of the school committee member?
there's 8 towns, 14 members. So if I am a member of the school committee, that means I could not retire and drive a school bus for our local school bus company because it covers all 8 towns. I couldn't work for any municipality because of conflict of interest. This covers firefighters who sometimes cover other towns.
You mean as a contractor too, or just as an employee?
As an employee.
Yeah.
I could not, no, I don't think I could even contract. You used to be able to just do a disclosure,
Right.
such as if Joe would say, I have to leave the room because I'm in real estate, and that used to cover it. But now, because we are a regional school district, which is a lot different than a town school district, we're just butting heads with the ethics committee left and right. This is their solution to us, is to have the towns appoint us as special municipal employees. We receive no money,
Right.
nothing comes out of it, it's just a title that protects us.
No eligibility for any benefits or pension or anything like that?
Nothing, nothing.
And you say it was the Ethics Commission that recommended this?
We're following their cue on this
Yeah.
to keep us out of trouble. There's been a few other regional school committees that have gotten in trouble. And I'm not sure of the extent of it, but a gentleman on a regional school committee owned a hardware store in a town. And he sold to that town. They had town employees could go in and sign their name. Well, then he went and another town wanted to buy from him. And he said, well, if you buy from me, then I can give you a discount because I can buy more stuff. And so he had 3 or 4 of the schools in the district, and all of a sudden that was a conflict of interest. And, I don't see a conflict of interest
No.
myself, but I'm not on the ethics committee either, so.
Right.
I can tell you Groton passed this the other night, Shirley passed it tonight. I don't think it's a big deal.
No, and when I raised the issue earlier, in conversation with Keith, and I'd like to, at some point, have the board kind of look at it in a more general sense. I think my concerns are more how it applies to a regulatory process than an instance like this. So I don't have a problem with what you're asking for, but I'll open it up to the board members. At some point, I'd like to follow up on the general topic for discussion. It's just always kind of been a fuzzy area to me.
I think town council reviewed my information.
Yeah, I have no problem, with what you're looking for. It just looks like it's solving a unnecessary problem.
Yeah.
And just like you said, I'd like to review it too, because there's other aspects of this law that even for someone like myself in real estate, we are special municipal employees because we're under 10,000 people. If we weren't that way, I can't go to other boards and represent somebody if I wasn't that way, so it does cover those things too.
Okay, board members, have any questions?
I just wanted to know if Keith might take just a moment to explain it. Let's say hypothetically for the public's benefit, but realistically, I appreciate the fact that you put
The
the
law in
information
there,
in here, but real language in a
Right.
broader context might be appreciated to the extent that, I'm just having a hard time, again, sort of what Paul's saying, understanding what a special municipal employee is.
Yes, it's a term that is unique to the law. It has no meaning outside of the law. There's nothing special about them, that they accept that it allows them to get a special municipal employee is eligible to then get an exemption to, in certain cases, which would allow them to act, and Charlie has made the example of allowing to represent another individual in front of another town board. If you're exempted as for example, one of the boards in Littleton that has long been exempted from it goes back to 2002, the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals have been special municipal employees since that time. And I believe that the circumstance there was in order to allow members of the CBA to represent other interests in front of other town boards. And in order to allow that, there have to be standards met. For example, it has to be an unpaid position or a part-time position that allows work during normal working hours, or that you were not paid more than 800 working hours in the preceding year. It's specific standards that have to be met in order to even be eligible. The designation cannot apply just to an individual, it has to apply to the position. So if you grant, you're not granting Charlie Ellis the status, you're granting it to whomever is the member or alternate of the district. You have, you occasionally get requests from individual, mostly it's been a reactive. I mean, how have we approached it? An individual member on a board has a problem which cannot be solved. The State Ethics Commission says unless they are allowed to be treated as a special municipal employee, which then allows the granting of an exemption. The most recent ones, Board of Assessors, Park and Recreation Commission. We had a cluster back in 2012, 2013, which added Board of Health, the Permanent Municipal Building Committee, the MBTA Commuter Rail Advisory Committee, a study committee to increase voter participation, and other positions. So it's, I do recall that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, the Board of Selectmen had a policy discussion of, rather than just do these one at a time or react, should the board just declare all boards special municipal employees? And that discussion did not get very far. That there was a lot of concern about what does it mean, and the board felt more, at the time, felt more comfortable in handling on a case-by-case basis. Show us the problem that needs to be solved, and then we'll solve it, as opposed to a generic solution.
Wave the wand.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay. Even with that explanation, I thank you. I think it's probably something we ought to think about, revisit on that, not to hold you up, but in the case of the Sherwood Valley Technical High School Committee, any board members have a specific concern with that one, or are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, no, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Good short one.
Okay. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 268A, Section 1, to designate the positions of the Town of Littleton's member and alternate on the Neshoba Valley Technical High School District School Committee as, quote, special municipal employees.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'll need that in writing,
Yeah.
sent to the school, please. Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Thank you.
All right. Keith, we have an appointment to make,
Yeah, we have
Cultural
a,
Council.
we have a request from the Cultural Council to make an appointment to their board, and I'm not sure if we've got folks from that group.
We have Lori. Cultural Council members, there
All
we
right,
go.
All right, great.
Welcome. Okay, well, we do have, we had what, at least one vacancy or just one vacancy? Just the one, right, because we've got, we made a number of appointments back in June and,
Yeah, it looks like we have two vacancies, and we have one applicant.
oh yeah, two, there's one on the top there as well.
2020.
Yeah, I didn't see that top line one. Okay, and we do have an applicant from Luis Sanchez Artu. You want to come forward, Luis? Introduce yourself, all that good stuff. We did get your application form, but sure, whatever's comfortable for you. And we know that your colleagues are there too, so they're aware of your interest in it. Just for the town at large, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested. And, there's no suspense here, you're going to get appointed, all right?
I appreciate it. Yeah, so
Don't talk them out of it.
so I've been an artist for a very long time. I grew up being an artist. I started teaching dance when I was 14. So I've always used dance and music as a tool for health and social change. even as a 14-year-old, I used it for community building in Boston. Now that I sort of have moved away from Boston and now sort of transitioning into further on in my career, I really wanted to see how much of a greater impact can I do with the arts. I've always been on the other side of cultural councils as a grant recipient, instilling programs for community building, health, and social change. And I was made aware of this opportunity to become part of a board, to be able to grant these opportunities. So I was like, yes, I want to help build community. I want to help promote culture, especially in the town of Littleton. I've really liked the town of Littleton and the little town that I've been
A
here.
lot of empty space around town. I would love to fill it up with the arts. I would anyway. Questions for Mr. Sanchez?
No, he explained this all pretty well.
Doctor, any comments?
Well, if you have any issues with IT, can we tap you on the shoulder as well?
Yes, absolutely.
No issues.
This side of the table?
No particular comments, I don't
No.
know the background.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
no, I didn't, great, good fit.
yeah, we look forward to seeing what ideas you come up with. Hopefully, I assume you intend to get actively engaged in promoting ideas rather than just waiting for the applications to arrive, right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and you've met your colleagues?
Yes.
Okay,
We've gotten
good.
acquainted for sure.
Yeah, that's good. Looking at the, an almost full roster here, it's exciting. I hope you guys are meeting periodically and thinking of ways you can get us more engaged as a community in the arts, right? Yeah, well, I only say that because, there's been some issues, but that's nobody's fault that's here, right? Yeah, right, good. All right, do we want to entertain a motion then with regard to the vacancy?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to 962 CMR 2.04 to appoint Louise Sanchez R2 to a term on the Littleton Cultural Council expiring June 30th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, welcome aboard. You need to get sworn in at the clerk's office. I don't know if anyone's explained that to you, the town clerk's office.
Not explained yet.
Okay, well,
I'm sure my colleagues can help me.
Yeah, they've all been through it, and you still got one to go, so find somebody else, right?
We're looking.
You're looking, good, thank
A lot of
you.
words out there.
Thanks so much.
Big viewership out there.
Yes. Police dispatch appointments, more appointments. All right, Keith, you want to set this one up first?
Sure.
And Chief Bernard and Deputy Patterson, I know you guys are here too.
Sure. Earlier this year, the Board of Selectmen had voted to authorize the hiring of 2 full-time dispatchers, which is what the police department needed to do to hold up its end with the implementation in the fire department of our advanced life support and paramedic program. And we have implemented the EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch, in the police department. And the chief is bringing us tonight one full-time candidate, still looking for the second, but also an on-call part-time to help the workload. So chief.
I think Keith pretty much summed everything up for me tonight. Thank you, Keith. But, first appointment is going to be for our full-time appointment. It's Joseph Carroll. I've known Jody 42 years now. So we're very fortunate to get Jody, and I think Chief Wazinski will back me up on this. Jody started in '94 in the town of Shirley as a full-time police and fire dispatch. He was also part-time in air, hence the reason how I know Jody in dispatch. He was one of my dispatchers. He left those towns and went over to Westford and the fire alarm office over there. Westford combined. He was looking for a bigger, busier department. He went to Manchester, where sometimes busier is not always. Didn't want to look at you.
Not Manchester by the sea, right?
No, this is Manchester, with his 10 different call stations at one time and whatnot. Jody was fortunate enough to put in for one of our vacancies that we have of the 2 full-time positions, and I give you Jody Carroll.
Okay, anything you want to add, Mr. Carroll?
Just like Matt said, the chief. Good.
Yeah, get used to calling him chief.
It's good to come back to like smaller town community. I think Manchester was a little bit more than I expected. They have a lot of issues going on out there. It's nice to come back to a smaller community where you feel more part of like the team, I guess. So I'm looking forward to it. I Manchester's not happy with us, by the way.
So I just look forward to coming back to this area. I'm from here originally, like the chief said, so looking forward to it.
Okay. Board members, any questions from Mr. Carroll? All right, you mind if we handle these individually? Doesn't make any difference, I suppose.
Two separate, I
Yeah.
can't make motions.
Okay. So if I'm hearing no questions, if we get a motion? Yeah.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Joseph Carroll of Drigget to the full-time benefited position of Police Dispatch / Communications Officer.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All
Hopefully we'll
right.
be back in front of you in a few weeks now that we'll hire. Background's not completed yet for the second person.
Okay.
But we do have 2 openings for part-time dispatch. This is a kind of a unique hire for us. Michael Ray is a resident of the town here. He was in our first Student Police Explorer Academy. He then went on to become a police explorer for us in Littleton, Littleton. After graduating Littleton High School, he started attending Fitchburg State College, where he's in the 4+1 program for criminal justice. I've known him for a long time, but the 4+1 program is a huge benefit for us. They go to school, they receive their bachelor's degree first, then they receive the police academy during the summer between their bachelor's degree and their master's program. And they come out of there with a master's degree, bachelor's degree, and full-time police certification. Michael's in his 3rd year there, so we're hoping to utilize him on a part-time basis, nights, weekends, holidays, to help fulfill that second spot in dispatch as a per diem basis. Will be Michael Ray.
Okay, Michael, great to see you. Love the fact that our Explorer program is leading us to making a hire. So, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Some of us know you.
As the chief said, I was part of the Littleton Police Explorer post about 4 or 5 years. After that, senior year came, I did internship. I was primarily in dispatch, loved it. I'm really glad to hopefully be back in there. A couple weeks ago, completed EMD, Next Gen 911, and TCPR, which is all requirements for the dispatch. So, other than that, I think what the chief said was I'm in college right now, so I'm going to be working part-time.
Police, not fire. How's that going over at home?
We're in blue, not red.
All right. Any comments, questions?
Right.
Okay, terrific. I'll entertain a motion then.
Sure, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to appoint Michael Ray of Littleton as a part-time on-call police dispatch / communications officer.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, welcome aboard. Thank you, guys. Jody, welcome aboard.
Congratulations.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much.
See you.
We're doing okay schedule-wise. We didn't set any records, but we're doing all right. But we are ready to move on to discussion of various items relative to the special town meeting. And I know we, okay, this is independent of the joint meeting, Keith, right? So.
That's right.
But we welcome, while we're talking about the town meeting, obviously FinCom, school committee, anybody wants to dive in, have at it. But do you want to set us up here, Keith? Tell us where we're at and what we need to do?
Sure. The warrant for the October 29th special town meeting closed last Wednesday at noon. There were no additional articles that were inserted beyond the 12 that the Board of Selectmen had voted to insert at your last meeting. So there's a procedural vote tonight to first you want to finalize the warrant, and by that I mean if there are any last minute changes you want to make to the warrant, if there are any articles that you put on that you don't want to keep on, now's the opportunity to do something about that. In a couple of, we had 3 members here at the last meeting, and in a couple of cases there were concerns that we'll put them on, but let's have a discussion with the full board just to make sure everyone's okay with that. You want to determine the order in which the articles appear. The draft order is shown on the screen here. If you want to change that order in any way, you can do that. Otherwise, when it comes to town meeting, that we'll take them in this order. The moderator would intend to use the call of the articles procedure again, so that if those present wanted to unanimously approve any without discussion, they'd have the opportunity to do that at the beginning of the meeting. And then in your motion, you would, in the first motion that's offered, you would also direct that that warrant be posted, and we have the signature page for you to sign tonight, and we get it posted. So that's a procedural thing, and then substantively, what we then come right up against is that the deadline for publication of the voter information pamphlet, the town meeting report, is next Tuesday at noon, is October 2nd at noon. So if we want to include any of the information about the articles, what the recommendations are, explanations, anything like that, that needs to be finalized. Your meeting tonight, the Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night to discuss financial articles. The Planning Board met last Thursday and adopted recommendations on zoning and some other articles. And in your agenda packet, I've included a draft of the town meeting report document, which contains explanations and motions, as well as the text of the articles for your review.
Okay. So, anticipating that there'll be some discussion on the adoption of the article recommendations, anyone have any problem with dealing with the first order of business, and Keith's broken out as a separate motion on the order of the articles and the direct posting? Okay with that, or?
I was gonna suggest moving Article 12 in the event that there's not, well, there might not be a hold on it, but in the event there is a hold on it, to put it before the sewer and the zoning amendments. Just because I anticipate any discussion on Article 12 to go quicker than 9, 10, and 11.
And those people that voted will be able to leave and get some alcohol?
And not stay around for the sewer?
Yeah.
You know, I
It
would
was
think
just a
after we
preliminary
discuss
thought.
9, 10, and 11, people will be more in favor of alcohol.
There you go.
It's all strategy.
I don't have a problem with
Yeah,
that.
the order of the articles.
So,
Make 12, 9, and adjust accordingly, I guess. Is that what the,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it,
I mean, I would move it before
Anticipating-
8 as well then.
what's gonna take a substantial amount of time. I can't anticipate that 12 is gonna take a lot of time.
there
In the
is
event there is a discussion.
a logic that kind of, deal with money articles first, and then zoning and other bylaw things
Right.
at the end, but,
Right.
whatever, I mean, I don't know.
It does increase the likelihood that we would see things through. That is, suppose we get to 11 o'clock, and we're in Article 11, we'll finish Article 11 at, or whatever the time cutoff that we've established is. We'll finish Article 11 if we're in the midst of it, but then if Article 12 is still dangling out there, we could theoretically have to come back for another.
Okay. I don't think we need to get a vote on that. There's a consensus. You want to make what is now Article 12, Article 9, and adjust accordingly, unless anybody objects. Anyone have a problem with that?
No problem.
12 followed by, no. Did I hear 8?
Well,
I heard,
I would say we should at least get the, well, I don't know. You were saying 8, Cindy, right?
No, I said no, I think Chase mentioned
Oh,
it.
Chase,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had mentioned it.
Yeah, I think it's,
So before the sewer?
I guess so, yeah. Right,
I think it's fine the way it is right now.
no, it's at the end.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, right, no, yeah. Put it, before the sewer.
Right.
So make it 9, everything's fine.
Right,
Make it
yeah,
9 in reorder.
Right.
Okay.
All right, and assuming that that will now be the order, can we want a motion then on the order of articles and the posting?
sure, move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the order in which the articles appear on the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting warrant as modified, and to direct that the constable post said warrant forthwith.
Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Great. All right, now to the article recommendations. Suppose there's no better way than just kind of one by one, Keith, right?
Yeah.
Want to walk us through?
Yeah, and I'd suggest that as you follow along, you look at the town meeting booklet.
Right.
Let me see if I can put that up on the screen. It's in pages, looks like it's on page 55 of 159.
I got it.
Okay. It's the warrant. Okay, and I'd say what it might be helpful to start with is the fiscal update from Bonnie of what money we have available at town meeting.
Okay. Fine.
So there's a couple of updates from your last meeting regarding the available funding. The Board of Assessors did meet at their meeting on September 20th, so I have the final overlay release and the other available funding for a town meeting. So for the planning purposes, as a reminder, you had $175,272 in available funds for one-time use from the remaining snow and ice deficit that was not spent. We also had an estimated overlay release of $300,000. After reviewing their outstanding caseload, they had a couple of large commercial cases that were resolved in favorable for the town. So the Board of Assessors did vote to release $760,000 of their overlay balance, as those cases are now closed. And there is an old article that Chris Stoddard, our Public Works Director, has confirmed is closed and finished and can be released and repurposed. That's for the fuel facility capital account. There's $133,944 remaining that can be repurposed. So again, these are one-time funds. They can be used for one-time capital-like projects. At this point, with the three items that were identified in Article 8, I believe, for capital, those items totaled $1,054,057. We have $1,069,216 with those three funding sources totaled together. So a little bit more than what's being requested in capital items. Just as a reminder, those three capital items are $201,804 for signal upgrades at the high school, $42,000 for the Master Plan Implementation Committee for zoning consultant services, and $810,253 for the fire department's ladder truck, which is a demo model. So again, with the available funds, it could fully be appropriated to meet these obligations if the board decides to do that. If not, the funds will remain and could be appropriated elsewhere at the May town meeting, whatever the board decides to do.
Or if it doesn't pass, it's on me.
Correct.
Okay, those are topics which are essentially part of what, Article 8, right?
Can I jump in? Just
Sure.
Just a point of clarification, Bonnie. The 760 is inclusive of the $300,000 overlay?
Yes, it includes it, yes.
Okay.
It's,
So they-
instead of 300,000, it's
They found
760.
there's another 460 based on
Right,
mitigation. Okay.
based on
Thank you.
Just to kind of keep us on an ordinal track here, Articles 1 through 7, Keith, are there any there that we should be, well, there are items there that might have some conversation. So why don't we, again, take them in order. Now we've got that input, we'll go back and go through them 1 through 12.
And so on Article 1, bills of prior years, we don't have.
You don't have any.
Yeah. that's
How come?
actually.
Nothing we can vote on there.
Article 2, I'm having difficulty.
Just nothing that could pop up, as far
There's
as,
always something that could pop up, but, you know, we try not
well,
to have that.
nothing substantial that we anticipate could
No.
pop up.
It's no vendor invoice for $100,000.
Right.
There better not be.
Munis training.
Yeah, no, usually it's like the little $100 ones that, you know, somebody forgets.
And that's a 9/10 vote, isn't it?
Yes, it
So
is.
it better not be
Yeah.
100,000.
Yeah.
We need to get 90% of the people to go along with it.
Exactly.
Okay, you're back online again, Keith?
Yeah, I have put up on the screen the proposed motion for Article 2 FY 2019 budget adjustments that's been recommended by Bonnie, and it's does two things. First, it funds the 2 dispatcher positions that the board authorized. Would those come from ambulance receipts? So it's an offset, it's budget neutral. The other adjustment is for, and the benefits for those 2 ambulance positions. So it's the positions and the benefits.
Correct.
And the other item is proposed is for VFW expense, which we've got a figure of $10,000 as a placeholder.
All right, and we're at a point now, I don't know how, I can't recall who was in the email exchange, but I know that we were tracking down to satisfy legal requirements. Keith, is that right with Tom, that he was okay with that? And
Tom wants us to have a lease between, he wants there to be a lease between the VFW and some entity to justify whatever the amount is that would be paid for as rent. Because he could only find a statute that authorizes the town to come up with money for rent.
Cindy, you've been the champion of this
Right.
year.
I believe that he has covered that, and I don't want to speak for Tom specifically, but it was my understanding that he was working on such an agreement. And that because there is another entity that,
It was the American Legion.
Thank you,
Yeah, there could be
yeah.
a lease between, we're looking
Right.
at a lease between the VFW and the Legion,
Right.
for which the town would pay whatever the dollar amount is. And what I think we have to look at is what's the basis for that dollar amount?
Right.
Is it-
right, and they did provide information about their operating expenses.
But in addition to supporting their costs, would we
Right.
get something material, like the use of the hall in exchange for that?
Well,
Is that-
one thing that I mentioned, and I don't know if you were in that email, is that the youth sports organizations use the hall, the
Okay.
boosters use the hall. So those are town
Yeah.
organizations that are provided for use of the hall, so,
Community benefit.
community benefit, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm not opposed, I just want to make sure that we
Right.
have our arguments in place
Right.
and that we pass most illegally.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, Keith, are you comfortable that we're in a position to
Yep,
act
I think we
on
can go
this?
forward with this, yeah.
Okay.
The only
Twenty.
thing that I would bring up is one of the discussions from the last meeting regarding the school resource officer. I know it's going to be part of the joint discussion, I believe, later, but if we decide to go forward with that, it would be in this article, it would impact this article. So I would need to modify
Heads
it.
up.
Okay,
If it's in the current fiscal year.
Correct.
right, okay, so, but that was all predicated on it getting voted in the
Yes.
other part. Okay, so it's not automatic, if we vote
So-
this through, it's not automatically here.
Right,
Yep.
so for purposes of this set of transfers for FY 2019, there's no provision for funding the second school resource officer in fiscal 2019 here.
But should we choose to do so?
Should you choose to do so,
mid-year?
you would need to address it here.
So this number,
There's no
this
other
this
place
would
to
be
address it.
potentially altered at the meeting before town meeting, if that were to happen? Or,
Absolutely, yeah. you
or
can
or
amend-
the annual, the special at the end of the year, is that the other thought, is that what you're thinking? Or, I mean, when would we do it if we're not doing it now, is what I'm saying?
Well, you do it, like, you do it half an hour from now, I guess.
Oh,
Or, I
all
mean,
right,
whenever
all right,
you
so
have the
that's
discussion.
soon, all right.
Yeah,
Well,
or,
that's just setting priority, that doesn't exactly close the book on it, right?
well, right, discussion and then half an hour is for fiscal 2020 priorities.
Right.
So, I guess the question would be, if you would need to give us some direction
Right.
if you want it, other than as a priority for fiscal 2020, because we're not, I mean, this plan does not envision paying for it this year, and there's no, and the funding source would need to, and the spending plan would need to identify what is it that we cut in the current budget in order to pay
All
for
right.
it.
Well, why don't we vote this as is, and if we need to come back and amend it pending the discussion later tonight, we'll do that.
And what's more, if, for example, you decided at a meeting on October 15th, or when you meet next with the selectmen and the FinCom and school committee on October 23rd, either of those times you could come up with an amendment for which we then, if you wished, if you reached some kind of an agreement on how you wanted to do that, then we issue an update and an addendum on what the motion is under Article 2. So the deadline for tonight is just to get this document to the printer. Right.
Okay. All right, then at face value, as it is, with the understanding that we could change it, which would nullify any endorsement of it, what's the pleasure of the board on Article 2? Any further, is that a motion then, Chuck, to recommend?
Yes.
Okay, second?
Second?
All right, any discussion further on Article 2?
No?
All right, then, motion's been made and seconded, the board recommend Article 2 as presented, with the understanding potential changes requiring a subsequent vote later. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. All right, Keith?
All right, next is Article 4. I'm sorry, it's Article 3, all right, which is to fund the agreement that was ratified at our last meeting, the collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters union, and the incremental amount that's not already in the budget article that was adopted last annual town meeting. The incremental amount that we need beyond that is $18,250 for in Article 3. And the reason why we do this at all is because the statute under which the town operates says that the municipal union agreements can only take effect if town meeting votes to fund the incremental cost for year one of the contract. So we bring that forward. Town meeting's already approved the same agreement or the same parameters for the other three unions, police, dispatch, and highway.
Any questions, comments from board members? If not, a motion?
Move to recommend.
Move to recommend.
Second.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Great. Article 4, Keith.
Okay, Article 4 is to adopt the local option excise tax, sales tax for retail sales of marijuana at the maximum amount of 3%. And that would be paid for retail, which in fact we don't have any payers in line yet. So we're not missing anything. We're not losing a revenue stream because neither of the two retail marijuana establishment or licenses have been issued yet. But once they are, approving this article would allow us to collect the 3%.
Unfortunately, this does not apply to freelancers.
No.
Questions?
Freelancers, is that what we call them now?
Walks outside like a little
Yes, honor system, right, yeah.
Just like what you wanted.
Questions, comments?
Move that we support, Board of Selectmen support Article 4.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
All right, Article 5 is the road acceptance of Foster Street, and since we have a public hearing on this scheduled at 8 o'clock, and the motion in that also includes adopting a recommendation, I'd suggest we skip over that one.
Did I miss the traffic circle part of it?
There's no, yeah,
Cleveland Circle.
yeah, it's,
I didn't see it. I expected to see
Go to
it.
flyover.
no,
Skipping the circle, going to flyover.
no, and when you
You'll,
look at.
you'll,
That's how rumors get
you'll hear
started.
all about it if it reappears. all right?
Okay, next is Article 6 is to transfer ownership of the Turkey Farm parcels A and B, which sorry for not having everything on the board.
Yeah.
But
Move
parcels A, yeah, parcels A and B, yeah, we need one here and there. And this is pursuant to a subdivision plan approved by the planning board. And step 1 is for the town to acquire the lots A and B. In the future, we'll get this,
Down the bottom.
yeah, down the bottom, but not right now, just these two for now.
Do we know whether the planning board and conservation commission have voted on this yet, or are we waiting?
Well, planning board,
Or are they generally supportive, or do we know?
well, I know that the plan, this is here because the planning board sent it to us.
Okay.
It's in their conditions, it's in their decision. And the Conservation Commission is also interested in this becoming managed property, which I'm sure we'll be happy to turn over to them to manage.
We just obviously don't want to be in a position where we're endorsing an article and come to find out afterward that they're still negotiating something.
No, they're, as far as I know, the planning board has signed off on this. The only issue the only question I had from the Conservation Commission
Honestly,
was the Conservation Commission just wanted to be sure that the conditions that are in effect right now for the private developer carry to the town, if it goes into town ownership.
Would it be
That's
overly
certainly-
cautious to
that's certainly
do
the
a
case.
recommendation predicated on the support of the planning board and conscom?
Sure, yep, that's fine.
You know, that does raise an interesting question. A lot of the erosion controls are actually on land that the town would then
Manage.
acquire and
Right.
manage. Which begs an interesting question about who's responsible for maintaining those erosion controls
Right.
until everything is reestablished.
So we need further information then.
It's,
Uh,
if you have questions, it's certainly fine to withhold your, I mean, given the sorts of questions you're asking, I'd say just, recommendation
Wait on it.
forthcoming.
Right.
Yeah, you can skip
And
over.
I think it's worth the
Skip over
conversation
this, yeah.
on those subject areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to run upstairs and ask them?
Now, we can schedule it for a few.
You kidding me?
Or
Our
you-
meeting's so
Or
long.
Keith,
Yeah.
if you want to follow up with,
Oh,
Michelle
yeah.
or Myron or whatever and update us, that might be
Yeah.
sufficient, but if it's not, then we can obviously schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just be interested in ensuring that,
That's what I-
especially those things like erosion controls. Outlet
I
structures.
mean, worst case is if you don't want to take, if the obligation runs to the property owner and the town becomes the property owner and you don't want to do that,
Right.
then this is not a solution.
Well, and
So-
my recollection too is that Area B had an element of wetland reconstruction to it. And I would certainly want Conscom to bless that that's been fully reconstructed, but the reconstruction period for those is usually 3 years. And we're nowhere near 3 years from when it was reconstructed. So are we taking over a liability that?
Maybe we don't need to do this yet. But those are questions.
But,
to be asked.
yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
Keith, if you
good
could add to
discussion
your
to have.
list of questions that the reconstructed wetland areas.
Yep, I will.
Okay. All right, now, I know Article 7 had some interest. We did have the water commissioners in this. Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin's
And,
here.
but I mean, board members had some interest in that or expressed that. We didn't have a full board at the last meeting, so, Keith, maybe you can set up the article and then,
Yeah,
if board members have any questions.
Yeah, the discussion we had last time is that the water treatment the work that's being done, see, here's the water department land.
Yeah.
And then and then they're looking to take over the highway property at 74 Whitcomb Ave. And as Nick Lawler had explained it to us at the last meeting, that their goal is to obtain control of the site by next spring, by next March, I think, so that when their project is put out to bid, that they can say that they have control of the site. The issue for highway is that there's currently storage of highway equipment in the structure on that property, and what are the arrangements that would be made for highway to store that equipment somewhere else, or what would the timing be? And so the commitment was to have those issues addressed. The article itself indicates that the timing of when the transfer would take place would not be on the date of town meeting. It would be the date, it would be effective on whatever date the Board of Selectmen voted to declare the property as surplus. So at least the timing of it is, and it would be in the selectmen's hands. And I think whether there's a solution or not would depend on what the plan is for storage or alternate storage of highway equipment.
Is that essentially, Kevin, as you understand it?
I think Keith did an excellent job of summing it up. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Board members, I think Chuck, you had some interest in this.
I did.
Where are we putting it?
So, on that note, we have at both water department and electric department in the electrical operations building, we have a wing on the east side and a wing on the west side. And as far as to take the plows, which are currently stored in the highway department garage at 74 Wickham Ave, and we're gonna basically make some room over there. We have some room right now that we could allow use of that area to the highway department for the storage of the plows during the summer months and in the winter months when they are utilizing the plows for dump bodies. I think with the agreement that essentially it would be for one year.
Now, when Nick was here, we had a nice philosophical discussion about indefinite. Now,
Well,
one year.
I'm trying to look at it, from the standpoint is that building over there, right now is on at 74 Wickham Ave. It is a building that really shouldn't even be used for anything. I think we could probably agree with that. But looking at it, long term, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they drafted a letter that we're talking about going through 2020 with that. And if it gets worked out
I'll
longer
jump in,
term.
Kevin, if I may.
Yeah. You're all right.
So I did have that conversation with Nick. That was one of the issues I had with this, and I was one of the people that asked that this be held, but where I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. Nick did commit that I would be able to keep their equipment out of the elements in one of the wings, but there was no time certain on that. It was just until such time as the highway department finds another means. And then some conversations have been had with Chris as well about the need for additional storage and maybe a couple extra bays. These are all things that we have to keep looking at as potential capital down the road.
I can promise you we have made accommodations or can make the room available. So if you've had that conversation with Nick, he's my boss, and I'm going to do it. So,
And we're on camera, this is being recorded. Chuck said, yeah. You had a similar conversation, Joe, or?
No, that was I have two concerns. That concern, I want to make sure what is done is permanent, so we're not 1 year from now having to find.
Yeah, or at least it gets them through a point in time where they are able to create their own permanent solution.
Right. So, yeah, this doesn't have to be the permanent solution, but we can't be dumped on the street a year from now.
Right.
There is no expiration, no sunset clause. The other point that I made with Nick is kind of like what's in it for us, so there's certainly a great deal of benefit for the water department, and there's been a need identified for some space behind the VFW, and I know that Jim Carr, one of the commissioners, has had that conversation with the commissioners and with Nick about, not sure exactly, I don't know, Keith, the map that you had up there, I don't know if it went all the way up to,
So I can speak to that. So as part of the design of the new Wickham Ave treatment plant, and currently we're looking at our options of, the parcel that you see, really everything on the eastern side is basically in the floodplain, with the exception of the parking lot area for where the building is located. So if we were to build the plant on the eastern side of Wickham Ave, at the well site, the plant would be located, basically end up being located in the parking lot area, correct? Yeah, so that's the only area that's actually outside the 500-year floodplain for the treatment plant. We do, however, also own a parcel of land on the opposite side of, right up there, you barely catch it. Yes, so that parcel as well, which backs up to the VFW as well, and one of the agreements that we have already stated we will do, because on that piece of land, there's, you know, where it is ours, is to make available a portion of that for additional parking for the VFW.
yeah, that's, those are a couple of conditions I had. And
Gravel parking.
That's the exact same thing I was talking about. Land is scarce for town use, and if we're giving up something, I think we ought to get something back.
So with those conditions added into this, I don't have any issue whatsoever. I just want to make sure that it's
I promise to
fair
start on
and
this end of the table next
No,
time.
that's right,
on
I'm
this
glad,
article.
I'm glad you raised the parking, for the VFW, because they can certainly
Oh,
use it.
absolutely.
Yeah, so
It does create a problem
I
down there for the
appreciate
neighbors
that.
and- yeah.
Right, I was just wondering if, I know Chris is here, if he had any thoughts on a plan going forward for storage for the equipment.
Chris?
Yeah, so what I'm most likely gonna do is bring before the boards, during capital season and budgeting, is a plan to do an addition off the back of our building. Realistically, I think we could fit 4 bays off the back end, which would most likely, or should, accommodate all of our storage issues, plus potential for a little bit of growth.
Office space as well, potentially.
Well, yes and no. What I'll come before you guys with, it will be just for storage, cold storage. Office space, that is another conversation we have to have down the road. That's not an immediate concern right now, that is a concern moving forward.
Yeah, so that is something that has been discussed.
Yeah.
That the space needs
Yeah.
working.
And I can, you know, it's really, I can come with multiple options and we can have that discussion.
And looking at like a building, a Butler building similar to
Yeah.
what we've got.
Basically it'd be the exact same style, same, I think it's American Steel was the company who built the building originally, the same basic principle off the back end of the building.
Okay, Chase?
Only question was if we're gonna turn the parcel across the street, 41380, into parking, I wanna make sure that we understand and we're comfortable that you're not gonna need that area for the well location.
No, our wells, it very well be that the treatment plant is over there, but we don't need the entire parcel for the treatment plant.
Okay.
I
I don't wanna tie you in knots just for the sake of
There's a
parking.
lot of benefits to us, and for the construction of a treatment plant to do it on the virgin ground over there. It's a much higher, it's about 10 feet higher in elevation.
Okay.
So there's the advantages there of doing that, but the location nearest the VFW is not an area that we would be utilizing for anything with the plant.
That
It works out well.
only thought or concern,
Okay.
as long as, frankly, as long as Chris was comfortable with the plan.
Okay.
I just want to stress that I think LELWD's definition of temporary and our definition might be slightly different, but as long as we can all come to that agreement. at some
Long-standing,
point.
great working relationship, and I'm
Yeah.
putting some faith into that, so.
No, like I said, I just want to make, sure
Yeah.
we're all aware.
And it's all been on record, yeah. Okay. Someone want to make a motion then on that with the aforementioned considerations understood? All I have to say is move recommend.
Move to recommend.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Yep. the conditions understood. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. Right. Your lawyers can see our lawyers, and we'll see in court, right?
Yeah.
The RA's in front.
Right.
The RA's on one side.
Okay. Who gets Tom, who gets Chris?
Yeah.
Next one.
Article 8, this has got pieces to it. We
Article
probably-
8, yeah, there are 3 capital projects, the traffic signals at Littleton High School, Master Plan Implementation Committee, and the Fire Department ladder truck.
Okay, first one is the signalization. We did have more of a discussion than I anticipated personally, anyways, at the last meeting. I don't know if there's any of the folks that were concerned about this having impact on New Estate Road, or for disclosure, where I live, but that was one consideration raised by neighbors who were not necessarily in favor of this article. Board members, have you got any thoughts on this? Either those that were here last week or any of them?
I have no problem with it. I mean, I wasn't here, so I'll just offer up that this is something that the school committee and the school department has been looking to rectify for, 10 years ago when I was on the school committee. It was a subject, and we met with Mass DOT a couple times, Mike, and went back and forth, so the progress that we've made over the past 16 months or so has been hard fought, and I'm very appreciative that all the parties that were involved, including Mass DOT and our legislators, have helped us to get to the point where we're able to present this. And with junior operators pulling out of that parking area, I think it's a no-brainer, and I hope that we can recommend with consensus.
You were here, Chase, your thoughts on that?
Sure, I mean, I'm happy to summarize it, though I don't know if we need to relitigate it. My principal concern is that I have no doubt that a signal at that intersection could make that intersection in a vacuum safer. My concern is solving one problem and creating 3 or 4 additional problems at different traffic points, including but not limited to the intersection with 495, onto 495, New Estate Road, as well as over around the 3-way stop by the very final point. And I think without that evaluation and looking at it in its totality, I think it's premature. And when you look at the warrants that are associated with this, the only warrant that it trips for Mass DOT is peak travel times, which we're currently mitigating with with someone to manage traffic. Could that time be better spent? Potentially. But I don't see this as something that has to be done now before we have the additional information to support. And I have no opinion whether it will or will not create substantive issues, but I think there's enough of a potential there to tap the brakes just a bit. I mean, we're spending our money. We have the opportunity to spend our money 6 months from now, just like we do today, and understand the implications of this in a broader context.
Yeah.
We've been fighting this fight, if you will, for at least 10 years, if not 12 years. There's been study after study. The Mass DOT has, although it didn't meet all the warrants, they've made an exception. They've said, we'll bless this. Because up to this point, they wouldn't allow us to put a school zone light up there. So we've made some significant strides. And the fact that we do have the ability now to pull the trigger and make this happen, I don't see, with all the studies that have been done with the professionals, there's a traffic light 300 feet away. You're not getting a tractor trailer that's coming down the road from that traffic light to this traffic light. That I don't see how there is going to be a negative impact. I can only see the positive. You're gonna have a tough time selling me on that.
Okay, I mean, let me outline what I see as the potential negative impacts. In terms of pure traffic throughput, right now, as we have someone there managing the peak flows, my suspicion is, and again, it's a suspicion, is that an individual there managing the traffic flow is more efficient at cars through the intersection than a light. And frankly, the biggest concern that I have, though I have several, is backing traffic up all the way onto 495, which already happens to a degree.
But those peak flows are still gonna be managed by an officer, they're not gonna be managed by the light. Those peak flows will still be managed, no,
So then what are we doing?
it's, so when your kids at the high school, and they're a 16-year-old, they're just, 16-and-a-half-year-old, just got their license, and they're trying to take a left when the sun's setting in November, and they're trying to take a left or a right out of the driveway, there's a set of lights there that can let them know that they can pull out safely. Right now, it's a nightmare. I'm sorry.
If I could just make one point in regards to this matter. Chase, I hear exactly what you're saying. Unfortunately, I think the light is gonna manage this a lot better, 24 hours a day. Whereas right now, I have an officer assigned down there from 7 AM to 7:45. And then in the afternoon from, 1:45 till 2:15. It's on a motion sensor. So if there's no cars there, there's no light going on. It's only gonna be a 5-second light, whereas when the motion gets tripped, it now shuts down, the cars go out, 5 seconds, it's back on. It's actually more efficient for the light than it will be for one of the officers I have out there now, or in the past, Millie.
Chris?
The traffic officer out there's #1 job is to get traffic out of the school. So they're stopping traffic for longer than the light would actually cycle you, because he wants to get as many vehicles out of that school as possible. Traffic light's gonna optimize, so you might only get 5 or 6 cars out at a time out of the school, but it's optimizing the flow of traffic on King Street as well as that. Where the person's sitting there going, I know there's 30 cars backed up, I need to get them out of here.
Okay, I see other board members from school committee interested in it too, but Cindy, you haven't had a chance to chime in yet, did you wanna?
No, I agree with Chuck's points. Not that Chase's points aren't valid or don't warrant some merit. But I just can't see how a traffic light isn't gonna work better than a manual officer, based upon especially what Chief Bernard just said and what Chris offered. I think I appreciate that it could back up, but I don't think we're really looking at the way it's gonna operate differently than what we're seeing now, like Chris just brought up with I've been there, we've all been there with managing that, it's just a disaster. So I don't anticipate it backing up to 495 personally.
I live from that intersection in the morning, maybe 2 or 3 times a week during that time period. I've never seen cars backed up heading toward 495 that would have any effect on the exit from 495. It doesn't even back up to New State Road. That's with the crossing guard there. My major concern would be backing toward the depot, because the other lights are that close, but not going the other direction.
Right.
That's fine, now I know you were looking to get in.
I appreciate Chief Bernard and Chris, backing up what I think the DOT has been telling us. Right now, we effectively have a traffic light there twice a day, and we're dealing with those backups. And I appreciate them attesting to the fact that it might very well, probably will smooth that out. The other thing that we want to remember is that that's a busy campus beyond Monday through Friday morning and Monday through Friday afternoon. There are periods of the year where there's 2 dance recitals every Saturday and Sunday in May and June, which are very busy. Indian Hill is up there a couple times a year, several times a year. Having that automated light where it senses that it's a busy time and allowing that traffic flow out, just the safety factor. And, we talk about, young drivers, but there are times when we have older drivers as well that are attending our, and it's just difficult. I mean, it is, it's just difficult. And knowing that we don't have to worry about it in the sense that it's automated, it's there, is a big thing. And as Chuck said, we have been really working. I mean, I appreciate Chase, elucidating some of the concerns he has, but to tap the brakes, the brakes have been tapped multiple times over multiple years, and we've had to get people's foot off the brake and get this process going. We've been working it really hard, multiple boards, multiple committees, people outside this room that are legislators that have really pushed on this for us. It's been an arduous process, and we're right there. And even remember that even if we approve it today, it'll be, the rest of the school year is not going to change this year at all. There's just no way it's going to happen that quickly. So, I'd hate to see it bleed out into yet another school year, because we think we need to get more questions answered, when in reality, I think we do know the answers.
Erica, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I think it's not it's not the peak times, the busy times that are really the problem. It's the time where you have one or two kids coming out of the high school and there's no one there directing traffic, and they're trying to go across a busy road to get out, and that's really where the danger comes.
Mark?
Mark Rambacher, Hartwell Avenue. I have no comment on whether or not the light's important or not, but I will tell you the traffic will back up to 495 on a regular basis in the morning. I go running through that area all the time in the morning, and it's dangerous. The traffic will be back past New Estate and close to the bridge going over 495. There is going to be a light in the Hartwell and 495 before long. I will tell you that, because the traffic there has become unbearable. But I don't think it has any bearing on this light. God help Millie, you know, for all the years she's been out there, I don't know how she survived doing it. Right.
Goat in hand.
Yeah. I'll offer my 2 cents worth, and I think if we say yes and then we do not push for a global solution with the state, working with the state from 495 to basically the airline, all our points of interest, then, you know, we're not doing our job. But I'm convinced after thinking about it that whatever bigger picture plan we have, a light there is going to be a part of that. And the fact that we get the state, surprisingly, to agree with us, and we have this window to act on it now, and we have the ability to fund it now, we could be in a position where this time next year, that light's operational, which is a real quick turnaround. And I also think there could well be a localized problem on New Estate Road, but that's one that we could probably address with a no-through traffic during certain time periods. But I have no problem supporting this item right now, but I also think we ought to, maybe we even use the Transportation Advisory Committee to take a look at that corridor and get the state highway folks, get somebody's ear there to talk about that.
We've got, I mean, if I could, the questions that were asked 2 weeks ago were posed to District 3. They got back to us with answers that are in the packet. On one point, which we've already talked about, is that the light itself is only on demand. So when it's only when a vehicle is exiting the high school that does the signal change. So if there's no one coming out, there's no automatic, there should be no traffic backing up, because the light on King Street will be green. So unless someone's coming out, and then only for the period of time that it cycles, that's all you'll see. The second was that MassDOT District 3 says that they don't have current traffic volumes, but they will plan on collecting new data this fall, so that they can study the need for signalization over the winter to see if the MassDOT project is needed. If there are additional locations along the King Street corridor the town feels needs to be studied, please let us know. That's our invitation right there, I think, to follow up with that.
And that goes to my point, and obviously it's pretty clear which way the wind blows here, but I do want to emphasize a couple things. First of all, when we say that this has been studied to death, we've studied this intersection to death. What we have not done is a comprehensive evaluation. So continuing to say this has been studied and studied is not wrong if all we're talking about is this intersection, but it is inaccurate to say that the cascading effects of this have been evaluated in any capacity, and Mass DOT was explicit about that. The second point that I want to make is that though we're looking at young drivers coming out of what is admittedly a dangerous intersection, the alternative here is pushing traffic around through residential areas in which we risk pedestrian motor vehicle collisions, which are orders of magnitude more dangerous and worse than fairly low-speed vehicle-on-vehicle collisions. And I'm not saying I would want to trade one for the other. I would rather have neither. My point is simply that we don't know what we're trading.
I think there was some new ones I wanted to get in. If not, Mark, I'll let you be the final voice.
I had a one fault based on, through you to Keith, what he read. Is there no protected left turn then anymore? Because the traffic officer does a protected left. And if there's no protected left, you're going to trade one set of problems for another.
Chris,
Yeah,
I think there was a queue, there was gonna be a queue.
Into the high school.
There will be
Taking a left
protected
from
left
here.
arrow.
Because that's not what
Cube
you
left.
just read that MassDOT said.
But the
I think
design- the design
MassDOT was
goes left.
referring to a different intersection.
No, at the high school, the traffic
No, I've
officer will
seen it.
stop
I've
people
seen it.
going left.
There's
And
a,
what
The drawing had the queued left, which has sensors
there's a
in it.
protected left arrow
Okay.
and a protected Q lane. It's the geometry of the intersection is not changing. There's gonna be a protected left.
But the
arrow.
light will be,
A protected.
the light will have a sensor for the left turn arrow.
Correct.
Okay,
Darrell?
One last thing, I'm gonna take exception a little bit to what Chase said there. I read the traffic study that was included from the Mass DOT, and the speeds along that street are very high. I mean, there's a, it calls for some enhanced enforcement there in terms of the average speed, and then the peak speeds recorded during some of the censoring things, particularly as you get later in the evening, which would be like after 7, which would also be the same time any evening activity at the school gets out, type of thing there. So you have high-speed traffic, because they were gunning straight away down the thing there, which was outlined in the traffic study by Mass DOT.
okay, and it's been pointed out earlier, there's still a state process for final approval on the design too, Keith, right? This
right.
this vote here essentially signals our willing to fund the construction of it, because that gives us the opportunity to do it quicker.
And before you get there, it has to be designed. The state will bring it to a 25% design, we have to bring it to 100%, which is included. 100% design plus construction is included in the $200,000 price tag.
Good debate. It's nice to have consensus, but it's not mandatory, otherwise there wouldn't be a need for 5 of us up here. And so I will welcome a motion and
Move that we support 8A, traffic signalization at Littleton High School.
Second.
okay, motion's made and seconded for Board of Sport, Article 8, Item A. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? Okay, the ayes have it. Great. B, master plan implementation. At our last meeting, Mr. Zeldin gave us a rundown on the $42,000 for the MPIC consulting services, and I guess you've all, since that time, acquired the endorsement of the planning board for that as well?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, and Keith,
Mr.
anything?
Chair,
Yep, sure.
For the 42,000 that's being asked for us, is part of that going to be used for planning on different things in the common area?
It is strictly, it is targeted for the common area,
Okay,
period.
good. I'm going to recuse myself on this, and I won't vote on it. It has to do with the same thing with the sewer, that someone in town has said I had some kind of role that I shouldn't be doing, even though I just rent from the common, but, so I will recuse myself in this.
Yeah, although, to be clear, to make your life even more difficult, it was stimulated by residents' preferences for the common. However, once it becomes part of the Littleton planning toolbox, it can in principle use wherever the town deems it to be used. So, in this, it's the stimulant for it was the common, but it becomes part of the general package. I don't know if that helps you or hinders you.
Well, for points right now, I mean, since it's specific to the common at this iteration, then Joe's very wise to recuse himself. Okay. Board members, any further thoughts or questions since we had this topic before us last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was? Okay. I'd welcome a motion.
Go ahead.
So I actually have some comments.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how I feel about funding this at this time, to be honest. Just because we don't have commitment, we don't know how vested the townspeople are in the sewer project. And I think a lot of what we're looking at with this form-based zoning relies on having the sewer implemented. To some extent, as far as the mixed-use component of it with the retail and the shops and the housing above, I know that we had one community forum where they, residents picked a preference, and that's kind of what led to this type of zoning recommendation by the consultant. But I feel that we don't know where we quite stand with the sewer right now, because we're gonna vote on it in October, at the October 29th meeting. I'd rather see how that piece progresses before we vote on a zoning change like this at this time. I just would like to look into this more. I just read it more thoroughly, and I don't know, I'm not totally convinced it's the best thing to do at this time.
Okay, well, I've got comments, but I also see, Mike, you're,
Yeah, putting on my NPIC hat right now. The form-based code has nothing to do with sewering. There were 4 scenarios presented by our consultant for potential zoning or no zoning changes to stimulate some type of development and growth in the common area. The first scenario was no change to zoning, no sewer. The second scenario was changing some zoning, but still no sewer. And then 3 and 4, sorry, 1 was changing zoning but no sewer. 2 is the same zoning changes but with sewer, and then 3 or 4 assume sewer and more significant zoning changes.
Right.
Those things are all going to go through the MPIC process in potential votes on changes to the zoning bylaws, regardless of whether or not we decide to move forward with form-based code. The form-based code idea just helps, we think, the MPIC, in the discussions we've had, help the community understand exactly what the impact would look like, because we get to pick it as a community. We get to make those determinations, and then if the development goes as we, if there is significant development in the common over the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to be along the lines of the decisions we've made as a community for form-based coding. The sewering is independent of that.
Okay.
Totally independent. We would, as a community, probably be very well better off, even if there's no sewering, assuming that there's going to be some development in the common. It might not be as much, probably, but there'll still be some. We're hoping for that. That's what we're working for. And knowing that there's the form-based code in place, it helps us understand that it's controlled by us, much more by us, not altogether, but to a much significant greater degree than if we didn't have this. And now is the time we want to do it, because we're going through this process with the MPIC. Our focus is on the common area revitalization right now.
Right. So I guess my point is, Mike, without sewer, how much economic benefit are we going to,
Well,
is going to be generated?
regardless of with the sewer, the economic benefit, I mean, I guess you have to be, the question is, are you talking the tax-based economic benefit, or to the property owner's economic benefit, or the ancillary economic benefits to having more people moving through the center of town on a regular basis because there's things to do there? The answer is that those things are still going to be determined not by form-based code or the lack thereof. It's going to be determined by how much development and what kind of development. Mixed use will or will not happen regardless of whether or not we have form-based code.
Okay.
We either make the zoning changes that allow for mixed use, or we don't. And if we don't, if we do and we have form-based code, great. If we don't, if we do make those changes to the zoning and we don't have form-based code, we're still going to get mixed use. We're just not exactly sure what it's going to look like.
Right. So
From a
what's the
static
benefit of the form-based code?
It allows the community to make determinations in code, so the developers have to adhere to it in facades, streetscape, open space, sidewalk, plantings, the colors, any number of
So it puts more
things.
restrictions on the property owners?
Yes, and on the developer.
Well, I would say in some capacities, it actually opens up opportunities
Right,
for the
right.
developers, is that?
There's a balance point when you debate it.
Right.
If you wanted to make it
focus is
extremely
less on
restrictive,
use and more on the form, right, the structure, the appearance.
Right.
you could make it highly restrictive, but it really wouldn't be a good idea to do that. And the trick is, while you're going through it, it's a community-based exercise. You come up with a set of parameters that are voted on at town meeting and either accepted by the community or not.
Right.
And then, once they're in place, the developers come in knowing, if you're going to develop, this is the way it has to go.
Right.
I mean, there's choices. You can make it with, there could be A, B, or C, but they can't come in and say, I don't like all those, I'm doing D. It's like, no, you're not. You have to do A, B, or C. And that, as a community, that's what we want. That's why we're telling you to do it that way.
Right. I guess I have a problem with mandating to property owners what they can and can't do with their property to some extent.
We already do with the zoning.
No, I know, but.
It's the balance, right? In
No, I
form-based
know.
coding, you can create quite a bit of choice for the developers. But at the end of the day, they're within those parameters. They have choices. It doesn't restrict them. It gives them opportunities. But as a community, we're not at their behest.
Like, here's an example, if you don't mind if I
Yeah,
interrupt. Here's an example. Right now, our zoning mandates very specific offsets from the road and offsets from adjacent property.
Right.
Which is, particularly with small parcels in the common, is wildly restricted, right? You may have a parcel that is this big, but you can only actually build on the middle interior
Right.
part of it. Form-based coding, well, I mean, it could be a lot of things, but what we need is the consulting support to help us understand what flavor of form-based coding we want that gives us, collectively, the community, which includes both the property owners and the public, the opportunity to develop this in a way that is consistent with what we want to see.
Right.
Which, in those two circumstances, I actually expect to open up opportunities for property owners there, which is actually part of the economic development argument that's independent of the sewer, that if they have more
Yeah,
options.
ideally, they'll have an opportunity for more uses, and they'll have more restriction on what the appearance is.
Okay.
You know, that's kind of the trade-off. I mean,
Right.
that's, because we're saying this when it hasn't been written yet, we haven't hired the
Well,
consultant yet.
you know what, I mean, honestly, I think what bothers me is I was looking through this, and the consultant, they used examples from cities. You know, and I'm like, Littleton's.
All you have to do is go a few miles from here. Air is using it on two sites, even as we speak. So it's not restricted to cities.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, in their report, they used examples from cities.
I think it was developed for
We've-
walkability in
we have a public
cities.
hearing.
It was an urban design initially.
It was primarily targeted to offset sprawl. That was its origins about 40 or 50 years ago. And so it's been used by a block-by-block basis or a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis.
Right.
Has now since spread because of its practical, shall we say, outcomes, already described here
Right.
in smaller towns.
I'm
And Air-
gonna get all legal and everybody, we have a public hearing, we need to open at 8. Do you wanna hold on this
No,
item? or-
no, you answered my questions, I just, I do have concerns.
Yep.
That's all.
Well, as we go through
And
this
as we go
process
through
and
the
develop,
process, Yeah, I'll definitely,
okay.
be voicing my
Good.
concerns and
We
questions going
expect
forward.
all of that and more. All right. Can
All
we maybe get a vote on this piece of the Article 8, and then I can hold off on the rest of the warrant, and we'll open and go through the public hearing?
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 8B.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded then to support 8B. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so we'll hold off on, oh yeah, one abstention. We'll hold off on C. I assume the fire truck is going to warrant a little bit of discussion, correct? All right, then we do have a public hearing, right? Keith, I should read the hearing notice first off?
Got the hearing notice on the big board.
Okay, and I still think I'm obligated to read it, aren't I?
Yes.
Well, it makes me feel important.
Oh, clerk.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You get any gas left over there?
oh boy, move that the Board of Selectmen public hearing, road layout Foster Street from Taylor Street to Harwood Avenue. The Littleton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 24th, 2018 at 8:00 p.m. at the Littleton Town Offices, room 103, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 82, on the proposed layout of the following as a public way. Foster Street from Taylor Street to Harwood Avenue is shown on a plan entitled, quote, Street Acceptance Plan of Foster Street, paren, from Taylor Street to Harwood Avenue, and paren, Littleton, Massachusetts, dated September 6, 2018, and prepared by Sherman and Friedrich LLC. Copies of the plan are on file in the Selectmen's office and available online at www.littletonmass.org. All interested persons are invited to attend. Comments may be submitted in writing by noon on Wednesday, September 19, 2018, to the Board of Selectmen's office, 37 Shattuck Street, Littleton, Mass. 01460, or in person at the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll declare the hearing open, and Keith, you want to set this one up for us?
Sure, that this is, the reason we're here doing this is that the town is looking to have the state spend $3.6 million on a project it has agreed to undertake on improvements to Foster Street. And in order for the state to spend its money on a public way, they need to know that it is a public way, and it has been laid out. And the thorough search of the town meeting records, going back to the 19th century, there's, you can find no record that Foster Street was ever voted on as a public way. It has been treated as such. You may recall that a couple of years ago, we went through this procedure for New Estate Road and Nagog Hill Road to have town meeting vote to lay them out as they exist in the deeds for the abutting property. So in essence, what the surveyors did was to take all of the deeds, all the plans are associated with deeds for the abutters along Foster Street, and essentially create a mosaic, my words, of what it looks like on their plans, and that's what Foster Street looks like on this plan. So that we're not taking anything as a public way, or laying out as a public way, anything that the abutting property owners own deeds and plans don't already say is where Foster Street is located. So and this, having the town meeting vote of this plan will satisfy MassDOT that it can safely spend its money, the state money, on this road, and so we're motivated to have them be able to do that.
And the intent is to do the balance of the road later on in the construction schedule, right?
Yeah, at some point.
As we continue down Foster Street, we'll come before the board and town meeting to accept the rest of it.
Okay.
We just couldn't afford it, and we didn't have time to put the survey together.
Maybe we can, as unexciting as it looked, maybe Chris walk us through section by section, if there's anything there to point out of note, and then go to board members' questions and open it up to the public, and hopefully there won't be any
Anything
major
exciting
issues.
about any
Yeah.
of these?
Any of these?
Locations?
Not, I don't have, no. I mean, it's all pretty standard, like Keith said, it's all.
Well,
every deed
maybe just to put the concern out there that at the intersection of Foster and Harwood, there's no room for a roundabout.
Very good.
Right now.
Stopping. Right.
There's not
We're
currently
stop-
room.
Yeah, not currently.
We own that big
Now
piece of
have.
land on the right
We're gonna do a
side.
flyover through Bumblebee Park and come back, you know.
Here is a pertinent, just to make sure it's explicitly clear, there's no takings involved in this.
Correct. There's no takings with this plan.
In this plan, right, what,
The TIP project is a whole different thing.
But as a caveat, people may, whatever they show on their deeds, they may think they have more than they do. So I mean, that's a potential issue, but.
Right, and I guess the issue that Chris is raising is as we go through the 25% and then 100% design phase, and there's a specific engineered plan to make alterations to that road, will there be other, will we want to realign what that line looks like? We may, but that only happens in
The state may.
consultation. Yeah, the state may. That only happens in consultation with all the affected property owners. But right
Public
now,
hearings and stuff.
all we're looking to do is to preserve what we understand Foster Street to be, so we can have the state money applied.
Board members, any other initial questions, concerns, observations?
I think we need to take a little bit more of Mr. Ross's land.
You said that.
Paul Ross.
Oh, yeah. Members of the public, any comments on the Foster Street from Taylor to Harwood acceptance? All right, then I will, oh, there we go, yes.
Just a question about, do
Oh,
you know?
for the record, Ms. Russell, yes.
Charlotte Russell, I own property at 181 and
Yes.
73 Foster Street. And I'm wondering if there's any sketchy timeline for the state project. When would things likely come before?
Chris, you have an idea, right?
Yeah, we're hoping to submit 25% design to them by the end of the winter, and then it's 4 to 5 months for them to review that. Then most likely at that point, they'll do a design public hearing. Realistically, I'm hoping by this time next year or the first of 2020 to have 100% design, and then it becomes as part of the MPO whenever they program it, so I don't have a date on funding, but.
Couple of years.
Ideally, it would be nice to have it at the end of 2020, first of 2021.
The sooner that the town gets the 100% design plans done, the sooner we can get on the queue of projects that are funded for construction. Because we're in competition with every other project in the Metropolitan Boston region, and so we want to be able to advocate for our project as soon as we get 100% design. Because it can take years to get the construction funded.
And would that information come before town meeting or just property owners?
It would be a public hearing when we have it, so it would be open to.
It would be for the public, but we'd certainly have specific outreach and notice to all the abutters.
But this taking is the only actual item that would go before town meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, this is the only thing that
No,
goes to town
taking.
meeting, or if we need, do we need to get fresh money for 100% design, or we
We
cover?
would, but it's usually, I'm gonna be able,
You can,
I should be able to cover it under.
you can do that in your road
operating
projects.
budget, yes.
Okay.
And could you characterize that project? I mean, what are the goals? What's the?
So well, to bring it up to 2018 transportation standards, taking advantage of complete streets. The state requires us to meet all complete street standards, so I think right now the consultant's envisioning a 10-foot wide shared use path, bikes, and on one side of the road, bike lanes on both sides of the road, 12-foot lanes,
Curbing, drainage, that sort of stuff.
drainage, new water main infrastructure if necessary, new utility poles, all the utilities would get upgraded at the same time. Safer, what the plan is to try to realign Grimes out of the MBTA's right away, to try to make that safer, obviously better pedestrian crossing at the train crossing.
So that would result in a significant widening of the road and
No.
taking of.
No, well, not with it, we're gonna try it, as of right now, the intention is to keep everything within the layout. The road, the physical pavement might get wider because of the fact that you need bike lanes on both sides. But the goal is to keep it within the layout of Foster Street as much as possible.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. All right, any other input from the public? Then I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Oh, could I just wanted to report as well, while you're still at the hearing, the planning board did vote to support this layout. That's why the motion says as recommended by the planning board. And that they expressed at their meeting that they are looking forward to implementation of the improvements that are coming from the project.
Okay, thank you. All right. And I guess we'll give a successive motion. A motion to close the hearings, made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And this is also an article, we're gonna be, well, we can go ahead and recommend it right now.
Yeah, you can, yeah,
The motion is
the motion
right in front of
includes
us. so-
acceptance of the article.
So do we want to reread that article? Yeah, might as well. Whoever would like to. Yeah,
Read the motion?
yeah.
Sure. Move that the Board of Selectmen vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 82, to approve the layout of Foster Street from Taylor Street to Harwood Avenue as a public way, as shown on a plan entitled Street Acceptance Plan of Foster Street from Taylor Street to Harwood Avenue, Littleton, Massachusetts, dated September 6, 2018, and prepared by Sherman and Friedrich LLC, as recommended by the Planning Board pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 81I, is that 81I?
Yeah.
To recommend acceptance thereof by the October 29th, 2018 special town meeting, and to file said plan with the town clerk.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Great. All right, and then we will return to article recommendations. I think we're at 8C. Is that right, Keith?
Yes, we were at the, and I'm just looking at my notes, had we taken a vote on Article 7, the,
74 now,
yeah, the Whitcomb?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
subject to conditions.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so the fire truck, I guess we understand actually the chief's here, might as well have him recap what the benefit is for doing it now and the purchasing the demo model and what the alternative would be, and then perhaps it's wise to have Bonnie weigh in on the financial considerations here as well. So Chief Wazinski and FinCom's here, so if you guys have input, we always welcome it.
So, right now, as far as the piece of apparatus, I'll back up a little bit and just explain a little bit more as to how we got to it. We had a grant opportunity that came forward through, was it Housing Key? I believe it was a
Yeah, the housing choice, yeah, we looked at whether a ladder truck would be a project that was eligible, and the key there was it had to be completed by next June 30.
Right.
So we got the chief looking for what's available that we could actually get delivered by June 30.
We needed that shovel-ready project, and typically the construction of a ladder truck is gonna take about 18 months. So that's the roundabout on how we found a demo model that meets our needs. So we were able to kind of check that out, and an air packs that we were going for as well for that grant. So that's kind of how we got to the demo portion of it. By going to a demo model for this ladder truck, it includes a few more things that may not normally be on it, but because it's built as a demonstrator. They build 3 or 4 of these roughly every 18 months, varying on what people are looking at across the country. They add a few additional things because they're trying to sell their products and they want to show those off. But like I said, one of these trucks met the needs of what we were looking to spec out. But as a demo, it saves us roughly $200,000. And not only would it save us $200,000, but it's basically saving us 2 years in time. If we were to go ahead in the spring, and have it come forward at Springtown meeting, and then go for the build, it would be an additional 18 months after Springtown meeting. So a couple of the bonuses that come forward, yes, it is a demo model. It does meet the department's and the town's needs. It comes at a reduced price, about $200,000 less. We're getting it at the $1,010,000 mark, and it saves us a significant amount of time. Right now, we have building issues on a monthly basis with the current truck. So honestly, it would be a stretch if we had to hold out on it for a couple more years. It is 30 years old this year, and the manufacturer will no longer build or make replacement parts for it. They won't even give us any recommendations on it. It's the last one in service of its model in the country.
From the last meeting we had, the one line of questioning I had from the public who saw it on television that we're asking is they want to know more about the status of the existing ladder truck, so that speaks to that. Somewhat, Chuck, you had?
So the sticker price is $1,010,000?
Correct.
They knock $200,000 off, and you're getting more, so the $1,010,000 is for the model that you've kind of picked out, what the bells and whistles that you feel Littleton needs. This one comes with a little bit more, fair to say?
So if we were going for the one that we had spec'd out, it's about, last year, it was 1.2.
Right.
So they're saying 3 to 5% on inflation. So coming in spring, we're looking at roughly 1.3-ish. So that would change. But the $1,010,000 has all of the basic things that we were looking for in this vehicle: the tank pump capacity, and engine. As far as the only things that would be different on it would be some compartmentation. And compartmentation is for our tools. We have the ability to mount tools in a variety of ways in compartmentation. So yes, and on top of that, there would be a few extra bells and whistles. Like the area that we load our hose on this model, it has a power lift, so it actually drops the hose bed to the ground. So we're not risking people being up on the top of the truck. You'd be able to stand on the ground. So that's a nice add that would be on it. But that still keeps it within, under that range. That's saving some significant money.
Let me get Bonnie in here before I get board members' questions. Just on this funding mechanism, to be clear, replacement of the ladder truck was in the capital plan. So financing it prior to this opportunity would have been done through what, an eventual borrowing a couple of years out, and then again, just I want to speak to or get on the record that by spending these available funds now, we're basically taking them off the table. They're, from any other consideration, so we need to be mindful of that too.
Correct. The ladder truck's been on the capital plan for approximately 5 years. It was kind of decided at the point that we were doing the fire station that we should wait until the station was done so that we had a facility that could house the apparatus. So the
You mean
station,
unlike the last time when we bought a truck that was too big for the station, we had to put an addition on the back of the station? Yeah, okay. Don't want to do that again. That was not under your tenure, by the way, no.
so the station is completed, and again, it has been on the horizon for the last 5 years. We did put some money away into capital stabilization the last couple of years, thinking that, it could be for the ladder truck, it could be for the facility needs that we know that we have. There were multiple areas that, that we could spend this money. But it has been something that's been on the horizon for a while. Last year, we appropriated $200,000 in order to try and get the matching grant. So there is the $200,000 sitting aside currently. So this $800,000 would bring it to the million, just over $1 million, to fully fund the article. With the overlay release this year, it's a matter of timing. The case is settled in the right, time frame that the assessors were comfortable with a larger overlay release, and they'll still have enough in their reserves to cover their normal use. That doesn't mean that this money has to be spent on this, but it does make it available to be spent on this without incurring any borrowing authorization. In a normal course of things, if I were looking at this without the overlay release in this magnitude, we'd probably look at a short-term borrowing of, maybe 3 years to meet I think I had estimated $400,000 at the last time. But again, with this opportunity, we wouldn't have to. If we don't fund this, then the overlay release remains available. We can appropriate it in the spring town meeting to reserves, to another capital project. It doesn't go away until June 30th, so.
Okay. Is that in the form of a recommendation or just an explanation?
My recommendation would be to fully fund it and appropriate it at this point. We know it's been on the horizon. We knew we were going to do this at some point.
Okay. All right, board members, input?
I'm just curious to know if there's any other grant opportunities out there for the truck. We know that, are there any coming up that we know of?
So we applied for the AFG grant. That's the only option that we had for this grant, and we did find out the Tuesday after the last elections meeting that we did not receive that.
Okay. Does that come up annually, or how often?
It does, but as of our last, how do I put it? We are financially in a good position in town, and for our last few grants, the final comment is, we have a difficult time demonstrating financial need.
We get punished for doing a good job.
Okay.
Correct. In essence, yes.
Okay.
Okay, other board members? Chase, thoughts?
Again, relitigating this from a couple of weeks ago, my principal concern here is doing this outside of the conventional structure for capital expenditures. I see the value in doing it as part of our normal planning process. Furthermore, with a truck purchase, say it is 18 months out, that actually gives us the opportunity to put away a couple $100,000 again, and ultimately offset more of the costs and purchase the truck exactly as specified. So my primary concern is doing this outside of our traditional process, our normal budgeting process.
Excellent point. Joe?
The opportunity, in my opinion, is there to purchase this truck that normally wouldn't be there at a savings that the chief has already said, so in my opinion, we should proceed.
Chuck, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I just wanted, the sticker after the $200,000 credit, demo credit, is $1.010 million. Take away the 200 that we earmarked last year, that gets us the 810. Okay, I was thinking we were down at 610. So all right. Question, Bonnie, maybe you can help me, or maybe Fred or someone from FinCom can help me out with this. Do you know what we spent the past few years in repairs for the existing truck?
I don't off the top of my head, but the chief might.
For repairs in the last few years?
So 2018, 20 grand?
This year, what are we up to this year? This is just Actually,
We could spend $5,000, but we've chosen to add oil instead of fixing it over.
right. Right now, we're at a position where it went to the mechanic, it has significant leakage on the, just engine oil. He doesn't want to get into the engine because he's afraid it's going to evolve into a whole engine rebuild. Last year, we spent $17,000. The year before, $13,000.
And the advice from the, is, don't put any much money into it, correct?
That's the advice that we're getting from our mechanic right now, is he did not want to delve into an engine rebuild, depending on, you know, the status of it. But his thought was that it was going to evolve into more. Last year, when we spent the money on the ladder, we had to reach out to the manufacturer to see if we could get parts, and that's when we found out last year that the manufacturer themselves would not supply us with parts, and would not recommend anybody to do that as well.
Okay. So the statement that FEMA sent back to us, to you, and you copied us, thank you for that. In order to help you obtain a higher score in the future AFG grant requests, it's recommended that you review the portion of your application in which you addressed your department's need for financial assistance and the inability to address the need without federal assistance. To kind of echo what Chase was saying, if we put this through the regular process and we earmark another $200,000 this year, and we work on it, we know we have a copy of what Maynard presented and Maynard got awarded the grant. If we highlight the fact that we just added ALS, we highlight the fact that we're purchasing new Scott packs. I know that you've mentioned on a number of occasions the need for one, maybe two ambulances to bring us up to snuff on that equipment. I think those would make a compelling argument for the inability to address the need without federal assistance. So I mean, it's all in presentation and how you package the baby.
And we did use that when we applied for this. We did reach out to two of the communities that had successful grants, and we used some of their narratives in this when we did apply. Going forward, the other items that are in our capital plan for the spring is our air pack and an ambulance that is up there. They're also up for replacement this spring. And the air packs, we are at a point where we tried that last year for a grant.
Absolutely.
The year before, we were unsuccessful in that, but we're in a position now where those need to be replaced in the spring.
FinCom, I know you guys haven't yet formally heard this, but you've heard it, so thoughts?
Just the one thing I would add to that in terms of information.
Yeah.
We've got $3 million in the capital stabilization fund, right? So it's hard to say you can't do it without federal funding when you guys, just help them out a little bit. You can position things, I don't know what all thing they look at.
It's all a
but
matter
the
of
reality is-
narrative, yeah. I mean,
Well, the reality
Foxborough got the grant, and they've got a lot of revenue that they,
Okay.
it's free money.
And what they do, I mean, we also have to supply all of our financials for the community as well.
So they know what we're sitting on.
The other, I guess, point that I want to make here is that though, 13, 17, let's double those like we did last meeting and say it ends up being 3% of the cost. So we're at $30,000 a year. That's the equivalent. Seems like a lot of money, but when we look at the capital cost of the piece of equipment, we're still talking about, a 3% annual maintenance cost. Well, on a $30,000 car, that's $1,000, $1,500. If I've got a $30,000 car that's costing me $1,000 or $1,500 a year, sure, I look at a plan to replace it. But I'm also putting money away in the meantime because that's not an unsustainable maintenance amount relative to the cost of the infrastructure. And so, here I look at this and fully acknowledge that the budget may warrant beefing up your maintenance costs for a period of time to keep it running until we can put away a bigger chunk of change and possibly make a better argument for a grant. That said, we're not incurring huge costs relative to the capital cost of the piece of equipment. And I understand it's challenging to get a hold of this. The second point I want to make is that nothing in this presentation accounts for the salvage value of the vehicle. And frankly, if someone else now I'm gonna turn around and try and help your argument here. If we can't get parts for it, somebody else clearly is in a position of not being able to get parts for it, which suggests to me that there's
So
some
we're the last one in service in the country, right?
Well, so-
non-trivial salvage value.
As far as the salvage on it, like if we were to get the grant, they have to, one of the things in the grant was that you had to clearly specify how it was going to be scrapped. It had to be scrapped.
Completely taken out of service.
Absolutely, because of its age and the equipment. The manufacturer of the vehicle that we're looking at would most likely give us $10,000 to $12,000
To scrap it.
to scrap it. That's what's going to be done. It's going to be scrapped.
The only thing I wanted to add to
Yep.
to what Chase was saying is when he's talking about the cost of maintenance, I think the cost of maintenance is relative to the amount of calls that the ladder truck needs to respond to. I know it does respond on a number of calls, but the need for the ladder truck to respond. So I think that has to factor in as well. My personal opinion, as a taxpayer, I think we should put aside $200,000 and we should reapply. That's my personal opinion. What I'd be willing to put forward is let the voters decide at town meeting. I mean, if this is all presented and the voters say, you know what, let's just bite the bullet and let's do it, I'm okay with that. But I personally,
I'll give my 2 cents worth on the, the negative side. I say the more compelling arguments are that we're doing this out of the cycle, and I, kind of hate that, although it always happens. And then also that spending the money here, it's the parallel argument that we're not thinking where else we might want to put that in terms of some of our other identified priorities. On the other hand, doing it this way, I'm not as concerned about the chief applies for every grant available, and I mean, we do that routinely, consecutively, consistently, and we get what we, well, for this one, yeah, well, we don't have a ladder truck coming every now, but.
5 years.
Huh?
Right now, it's 5 years.
Right, but I mean, we're a familiar customer at the application window for grants. But anyway, beyond that, I'd say the opportunity, rare opportunity, because we can spend it out of pocket, is to save ourselves $200,000 and avoid borrowing costs. And sure, we could put away a couple $100,000 a year, but that's not going to. By doing that, we lose the the sticker price value of the. It's going to go up. Right, by the time we get around to buying it.
And then we're not sure if there's gonna be an available demo model.
Right, I mean, probably isn't, but, that's, so I just think on balance, there are good arguments both ways. This is an occasion where the money is there, our stabilization or our other savings balances are pretty good, and if we get to get this thing in service sooner and we save $200,000 and we don't have to borrow, that sells me on it, personally.
The most compelling argument for me is the 18 months. Because I do know that, we've had this conversation multiple times, Scott, and you've told me the maintenance issues for years. And so that 18 months, if we do.
There's risk
kick it out
avoidance.
again, yeah, there is risk avoidance. But then, I can counterpoint myself. Keep everybody here till.
It's not how I go about replacing vehicles.
I know.
You notice that? When it's ready for antique plates, it's,
Still feeding the squirrels under the hood.
Okay. Any other input from the public or board members from this item? I think we've had a pretty good discussion on it, but we might as well move ahead.
Can I ask one quick question? Keith,
Just teasing.
there's,
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice you back there. We'll let you get in there.
this is just a quick one. Under, in the packet, after 3A, finalizing the order of the articles, 8B is listed as a 2/3 vote. Is that just an artifact of prior to when we got the overlay
Yes,
and
it is.
anticipated
Yeah,
borrowing?
so it won't say that in
Okay.
the warrant.
Good catch.
Well, I just wanted to understand where we stood at town meeting. So there would be
It's a simple,
just a
it's a simple majority if the, with the funding source is recommended by Bonnie.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry, you had something to add?
Just a comment, not a question. Rachel Blaine from 3 Apple Ridge Lane. I would just say that in addition to the compelling argument on the financial piece, it's a public safety issue too, so it is, I think that's a pretty significant adding compelling argument.
All right, thank you. Chief, the Deputy Chief?
Jeff Patterson, 7 Christina Street, speaking as a resident and a taxpayer. This has been going on for 5 years. We've been pushing this down the road. That truck's been out of service a ton. If my house catches on fire, I want to know that that's coming from our town, from my taxes, not waiting for Acton to show up, not waiting for Air to show up. We pay taxes, we've been, if something happens in town, heaven forbid, we're waiting for other towns to show up here.
All right.
I was basically going to say he does, but my concern is that something happens that can't be fixed and we don't have the truck. And that's as a citizen as well.
Yeah, I mean, we do rely on mutual aid, but to Jeff's point, we don't know when mutual aid will arrive.
The risk is
In all
going up high every.
In all theory.
Right.
Yeah, and the time it takes to
truck
turn it
rolling
around is,
From our house is gonna get to our house quicker than one of the.
you live pretty close to Acton, though.
You just let mine burn.
Okay, all right, great discussion. Any board members ready to make a motion?
I still feel that I'm okay with putting it forward to, letting the residents decide, let town meeting decide. But as far as making a recommendation, I think that I'm not,
Well, again, it doesn't have to be unanimous, but, I mean, I'm okay with recommending it, and I'm okay with hearing dissenting arguments, but I'm looking to see what yeah.
I move to recommend.
Okay, so I'll second that.
You're gonna,
No? Oh,
we either need a second, or you're.
no, they seconded
I
it.
second.
Oh, you did,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
all
yeah,
right,
they
well, sorry, then the
seconded
motion has been made
Yeah.
and seconded, sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
catch
yeah.
that part. And we've heard the arguments, but if there's any further discussion, everything's been duly noted. All those in favor of recommending, what is it, 8C? 8C, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so it passes, but not unanimous. 3-2.
I said nay. I said nay.
You did too? Oh,
2-3.
oh, didn't pass it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Not recommended.
In favor were
Paul and Joe.
and the
Okay.
others were.
Right.
Okay, well, then we won't be putting it on the article, on the
Well,
warrant.
it's on the
Well,
board.
it's on the
warrant.
warrant, just
Warrant.
does not recommend.
Right.
Okay, well,
Yeah, the voters decided.
that's,
Unless you want to take it off.
well, that's,
I think it needs to remain on there. I'd rather say that.
Chuck's vote was to bring it full, Chuck's second was
yeah, I
to bring
just,
it forward.
Right.
hate bringing anything forward and say, here's a fully thought out article, but we don't have a, it's up to you. I mean, it's always up to them, I just think that's implicit, but, anyway, we can speak to it individually at times, I guess.
Well, if you feel more comfortable rescinding it and just not.
No, I mean, I'm in favor of doing it, so I don't want to rescind it. But I appreciate what you allow us to go forward.
I think that's important.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would suggest we jump to number 5 and go back, come back to the recommendation of articles.
We're almost done. If you think about it, we got Article 9, I don't know, I guess the planning board articles, we could have.
You might have
7:30.
I think we got all the financial ones.
All right.
Done, so.
Well, we don't, the sewer is next.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. You want to,
That's my recommendation, is that we come back to the recommendations.
well, if our point is to, we want to get on with the financial discussion, the sewer article is the last funding, spending article that we've got, it's the next one up.
Chair.
Well, what's the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, let's just do Article 9.
Okay, we'll take a stab at it then. Obviously, we,
I'm going to recuse myself on 9 too.
oh, okay, all right.
See, he just wanted it to come at the end so he could go
Yeah,
on.
but there you go. Okay.
Way to go, thanks a lot.
I'm learning.
He's
Yeah,
not old, he's
picking
just
up on that one.
experienced.
All right, so this is the long-anticipated borrowing article for the design for the sewer, originally anticipated for last spring, but we pushed it off because the area covered by the proposed sewer district was changing significantly, and we're here now. I don't know, Chase, you want to add anything in terms of summary?
At the risk of possibly talking too much, let me take a 1-minute stab at a summary of where we're at. So where we stand is that we've reached out to property owners. You can see we've put together this document for public consumption. The map of interested property owners is on the top of that. And pay less attention to the various colors and more attention to the density of the color in general. Particularly within our business community, there's significant support for going forward with the Littleton Common Smart Sewer. What we saw as of last year was that we pulled back the sewering area a little bit because some of the prospective residential customers had concerns about its applicability to them. So we've reevaluated it. The costs have come down substantially because it's now a smaller system. What we're looking for now is the funding to go forward, $2.2 million to go forward with a design component of this, anticipating, better be careful quoting off the top of my head, anticipating something on the order of, there you go, total estimated project cost of $27 million when it's all said and done. Overall, the expectation here is that the utility ratepayers will be the ones paying for this system. That includes both the design down the road. Now, of course, the town is picking up the cost for the design now with the expectation that the town gets paid back over time, or more accurately, the town is a significant user of the sewer. And so the town itself will actually be paying into the sewer, offsetting our costs for wastewater management and other scenarios. And the overall timeline here is that we're looking for $2.2 million now to do the design. That design, actually don't know off the top of my head, can't recall where we settled in terms of timeline, but approximately 6 months to a year to
About
do.
a year.
A year, okay. To do the design, and then a year later we'll come back for the construction funding. In the interim, going after, of that $27 million, we anticipate somewhere on the order of $6 to $7 million worth of grant funding, but that really could range from anywhere from a couple $1 million north of $10 million, depending on how much the state elects to kick in. We're working very hard to bring those costs down with grant funding. So that was sort of a snapshot of all of the little pieces. And I didn't entertain you guys with a description of what the quirk is again, but maybe I don't need to. So.
Okay. Just hitting the subject. There we go. Having discussed the subject so many times, it just sounds like we're beating people to death with it, but it's always hitting somebody's ears for the first time new, so I think you did a great job there, Chase, of summarizing it. And the key impacts for the town, again, is we're making the borrowing. It will be self-sustaining, but we're one of the biggest customers, or the biggest customer, we being the town, so we participate also by hookups and paying the rates down the road, so it's important that the town understand that as well. Anything else? Board members, any questions, observations?
I mean, one thing to note here is that we anticipate some significant public outreach between now and town meeting. To the extent that we glossed over huge multi-million-dollar questions in the design, in this forum, that was rather deliberate in the sense that we've...
And this document itself will be getting mailed out, what, in about 10 days, Keith?
October.
The first week of October?
It's, next Monday.
Okay.
It's going out on October 1st.
All right, and and then we also got the engineers putting it into, actually, the copies, do we have the copies yet of start distributing the trifolds? We're gonna need some for tomorrow night?
We have 50 copies for your
Okay.
meeting.
meeting tomorrow
But we
night.
have this digitally, and we're also gonna be getting this in a form that can be shared, through social media too. The Weston and Sampson folks are working on that.
Right, and they can also go to the website and
Yes.
confirm, right?
Yeah.
And that's the last point that I wanted to make, is that the website has huge amounts of technical information if you're so inclined, or just
And the financial
contact.
information.
And the financial information, you know, so there's a lot of resources up there to get specific information. There's also an email address for specific questions, and then there will be opportunities for the public to be involved and ask more specific questions at the town meeting if you haven't yet had the opportunity to get your questions answered.
Okay. All right, before yes, Joe? Oh,
Ask a question, Mr. Fontanella.
okay, thank you.
He needs it.
We're always welcoming questions on this subject from the public, so anybody out there, any sewer questions before we get to a vote on the, from the board here and let Mr. Knox back into the room? Oh, he's back there. Yes, Darrell?
Yeah, Darrell Baker, Grist Mill Road. I couldn't find it, and you mentioned it during the thing there, that the town would be a significant user of the system. At what percentage there? So of the projected 27 million that will need to be recouped via operating benefits
Yeah.
and expenses, what's the town's percentage of that 27 million?
I think there's probably a couple people here that know this right offhand. It's a bit of a moving target because we have picked up some additional big players as potential, but Chris, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, the town, it's approximately 40,000 gallons a day, so just under a third of the plant would be the town.
Yeah, under the current system, because we already, you know, most people understand, we already have a system that serves this building and the schools.
About a quarter, I think, of the town.
Yeah, a quarter of the flow is.
A quarter of the flow would be the town, so.
But it doesn't
that's not my
break down
question.
exactly as a quarter of 27 million.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
And that I don't know off the top of my head.
We can
I'll
get
dig
you
into
that
it
answer.
again.
We do have a number,
Because-
1.8 sounds about right, but I don't know.
1.8 million, that number came up earlier. Fred, you,
Depending on which spreadsheet you use, and there are two in play that I know of right now. One says the hookup fee for the town is about 1.8. The other says the hookup fee for the town is 2.3.
Right.
So somewhere in the $2 million range. is
Right.
about right.
and I don't think either one of those plans, we hadn't yet incorporated the expressed interest of the point in hooking up, because that's,
All I know is the most recent numbers that were presented. And if you take that, plus the 2.2 the town's fronting for design, plus the 482 that the town has already appropriated, it's about a $4.5 to $5 million price tag that the town is upfronting the project.
right, but the engineering and the consulting fees are all reimbursable through the system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I assume
But
so. Yeah,
but our hookups are
Oh,
not.
the hookups are not, right, so it's the 482 plus the hookup, so about $2.5 million.
But operating expenses and the other pieces there are also, so I went through the thing and it had various formulas of estimating, you know, based on the business size or the type of business, some multiplier by that. What I couldn't really get to was a bottom line of, you know, what's the town's number of that piece there, and then what's the part that's gonna be out, and you divide the two, and that's the town's percentage of the total bill that's gonna be footed, not just the upfront pieces there, but of the whole life cycle cost of the piece there, and you can't really get that number from any of the material presented.
No, you can't really, because that material is focused on individual property owners and businesses that run at 1 to 2 EDUs, you know, one household, two household type expenditures. There's some substantial differences in hookup costs for our largest contributors, so when we look at the point, they're not paying just a you know, if they represent, well, let's use the town, if the town represents 30 EDUs, we're not paying 30 times the hookup cost, because it's prorated. But,
I just recommend you come back with some crispness on these numbers. There's $27 million has got to be raised either from town funds and ratepayers, because the town's going to be a ratepayer. It's going to come out to some split based on the allocation here. and I can't find that number anywhere.
Okay,
Neither
well,
can I.
specific to the town's piece of it, we will, well, Fred, you're part of our working group on Friday, we can address this again and ask the engineers to prepare something that specifically speaks to the town's cost, so we can pull that out. And again, it's a bit of a moving target,
Yeah,
because
I realize
people are
that,
coming
but-
on board.
And it will shift as the things, but we'll know what the shifts are. Right now, I can't pull that number out.
Yeah. Thank you, good input. We need to be clear on that, so if it's not clear, then we'll have to update our information.
Thank
Any
you.
other, thank you, any other public questions, comments? All right, board members? All right, then I'd be looking for a motion on, what is this, C? D?
No, it's now
Oh, no, Article,
Oh, it's 10.
Article 10 is posted.
No,
Article, yeah, the former Article 8, now known as
Yeah,
Article
the
10.
article formerly known as,
Move that the Board of Selectmen supports Article
10.
10.
Second. Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Joe, you can come back.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Now, you want to get off schedule, get off the agenda and allow the folks that came here for our joint meeting to get home at least a little earlier than us?
Right.
Okay, we'll take that out of order. So, Keith, do you want to prep us on that? This would
Sure,
be
I will to.
agenda
say
item
that
5.
Our goal for getting out of the room tonight on this item is for the board to adopt budget guidelines. And the departments are preparing their requests for fiscal 2020 budgets. Those are due October 31st, Bonnie?
Yes.
And in preparing the budget requests, the boards have traditionally met in September to come up with guidelines for what the department should submit. And what is being recommended by Bonnie is the motion that's on the board. It basically is in the same form as you've adopted for the last several years, where you ask for first 2 budgets, level staffing, required services, as defined in the levels in the current year's budget. And secondly, a mission budget, which would invite the departments to do things beyond the current level. So for example, if there was a proposal to add staffing, it would come in a particular department, that would come in the mission budget that was submitted by the department. Beyond that, Bonnie I suggest could go through what the current snapshot of fiscal 2020 looks like, what the estimates are of revenues and expenses and increases, so we can see whether we're, even at this level, typically we have a negative number, as we do here, of, if you look at projected revenues versus just carrying forward our expenses and allowing for anticipated increases in a number of areas, then the result is typically a negative number, which we have tonight.
Correct. So the past few years, we've actually addressed some staffing shortages, and this is kind of the first year that I'm kind of getting a little bit of a squeeze in a number of years. And I would point that out in that this deficit is a little higher than we started last year at this point, by about $200,000 on the level staffing budget. And again, there are a lot of assumptions in there. We're very early in the process. The Board of Assessors have not yet finalized new growth. That could have an impact to that. And new growth in 2020 will also have a further impact to that. But basically, what we're requesting is in the first scenario, the level staffing or required services, that's not a level funded budget. It's level staffing, so it's incorporating any of the contractually obligated increases that are programmed by the collective bargaining agreements. It would be required services on the school side if there are any other mandates that are required on their end that they have to fund in their budget. It would include those items also. On the mission budget is typically where we have the departments target increases that they feel would best meet the needs of the community. It might be in personnel, it might be in program expenditures for just general expenses. But that's where we invite some robust discussion on where those ads might take place, should we be able to fund them. And again, the past few years, we have been able to target a few increases. My preliminary estimates are showing about a 2.65% increase in operating revenues, so these are the recurring revenues. It's not free cash, it's not overlay surplus releases, it's just recurring revenues. And the operating revenues are looking to increase by about 2.92%. So that's resulting in a deficit of about $545,000 for the level staffing budget of the required services. And again, I have a lot of estimates in here that may or may not be accurate. We are going to finalize the new growth prior to setting the tax rate in November. So when I do that 5-year projection meeting for you, I think in October, I'll have the detail sheets to back these up for you, so you can actually kind of drill into the detail numbers. So this is like the 20,000 foot view. Also, the state budget hasn't even started at this point. We just, they're not going to really release anything until February to start their process. So I have level funded state aid at this point. I have projected a small increase on the assessments because they typically do go up every year at the state level. And I have just highlighted some of the increases that we did last year. We had a few targeted increases in the school staffing. We did add the facilities maintenance person mid-year for this year, 2 police dispatchers for this fall town meeting. So that's, it was, and last year, prior to that, we added the ALS paramedics in the previous year. So I would point out we've had some targeted increases, but I'm starting to feel a little bit of the pressure for that. So as part of the budget instructions that we give to the departments on October 1st, we will request prioritization of funding as it relates to the functions that they do. So they're going to have to put in priority order, what their essential duties are. And that's going to, differ obviously from department to department. And that you're able to see what functions are critical should there need to be reductions that need to be taken at some point. And again, with the adopted financial policies that your board has adopted, I will include those to with the budget instructions so that they can target any increases to meet the board's goals and address those first. Those will be due back on October 31st in my office in electronic format. That will allow me to gather the data, kind of clean it as I need to, put it into the books that we issue. I'm hoping to get the electronic, I'm hopeful, through Munis, if I can speed up my conversion a little bit so that you can actually log in and see them online, but I'm gonna hedge on that a little bit. We've got a lot of other things going on. But again, you will have all of the detail and the backup for all of the capital and the operating budget requests. And my commitment is to get all of that information to the boards by December 15th, which will give you a few weeks to look at it before the January 5th meeting. And that way, if you have questions or you want to meet with the departments, you could do that. Again, the hearing's going to be held on January 5th. And on the capital planning, just as an overview, my estimates are that we will have approximately $2.16 million available for capital. $971,000 of that comes from accumulated debt service reductions, and $1.1 million would come from the undesignated fund balance or free cash. So it's a little bit more than we spent last year at just over $2 million. But again, meeting with our projections, it kind of fell right in line where I thought it would land. And again, having your goals and priorities issued to the departments will help in crafting those capital requests going forward.
Before we jump into the individual priorities, and I know that FinCom's especially looking for us to identify the areas that we're individually or collectively looking to make a priority of. How about on guidelines? Any comments on that FinCom school committee process?
At this point, we haven't seen the numbers, so we'll see them tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Obviously, headcount tends to drive a lot of this. And then, the capital rolling forward. decided not to support $1 million item tonight, and whether you're thinking, what your thinking is in terms of when you would want to try to pull the trigger on that would be helpful. If you want to try to do it next year, well, then that will really impact 2020. If you want to try in 3 years, can we put away so much for the next 2 years to, you know, to salt some money away for it? So those are the kinds of things, if you can give us some feedback on what your thoughts are, that would be helpful, so we could plan. But other than that,
Okay. Well, and again, as I say, in a minute or two, we'll go around. I'll ask everybody to kind of identify their individual goals, and hopefully they will match up with our previously agreed upon goals in a general sense, and try to put them in the dollar and cents request. Great. School department, where are you guys at this point?
We're fine with the timelines. We'll certainly be ready for January. Our process will mirror in a lot of ways, starting in October and moving forward. We appreciate the emphasis of the level staffing / required services. As we always remind ourselves, the school department budget is much more expense related. The ratio of expenses to staffing is much more pronounced than it is for many of the other departments. I do have a minor concern, and it's just a semantical thing with, you know, the title is level staffing required services, but in the last line, expenses to be level funded at the FY 2019 amount. For us, that's contradictory. There's no way that it's highly unlikely that to maintain our required services that we can level fund expenses, because our required services primarily, you know, towards a lot of things, but the big driver is special education. That's going to probably go up.
It's statutory, it's got to be under
Correct.
control.
So, you know, just as long as we're all, I'm not worried about it in terms of this motion, as long as we're all on the same page with that, we'll be fine when we get to January and start to, you know, figure it all out.
Okay, good point to bring up. Board members, okay with just going around individually and having folks identify their budget priorities? I assume you've had a little opportunity to think about those, and then we'll see if magically we arrive at more or less the same place, and if not, then at least they'll know where we agree and disagree. Cindy, how about we start over there with you?
Why don't we start with Joe?
I just was conscious of having
No,
led off this.
I
to-
appreciate
all
that,
right.
Paul. I
Okay,
really
Joe,
do.
yeah, budget priority, that's fine.
Budget priorities, but one of the things I want to mention on the open space part is that one of the recommendations I had too is that we, members of this committee, meet with the large landowners to find out where they stand. So I want to make sure that's taken care of too. That maybe that's just not the financial part of it, but I want to, that's not included on this. Open space and economic development.
We should schedule some time to discuss that, but I don't know that that's necessarily a budgetary consideration.
Right. But I just want
But I
to.
think I agree completely, Joe, because I think it does have a budgetary implication in the sense that we can talk right now about putting away money, but I think we all recognize that unless we engage the property owners and we set a plan for what are we gonna do with this money hypothetically, which involves that, then it's just gonna get spent on the first, if we have $100,000, the first $100,000 property. If we have $1 million, the first $1 million property, so.
But we had this discussion early to the financial policy group met, and we were talking about kind of honing in on, one of the objectives this year is honing in on some of the stabilization accounts and trying to avoid exactly that scenario by putting some pre-criteria in place for a variety of these things, so that, you know, I think I use the example, it's like some stray 4-acre parcel that happens to be surrounded by a lot of people that are very angry, but it doesn't have any great value to the town, but if they come forward and they're the first ones to ask, you know, for you to buy it, well, then you just blow your money, right? So, and let's not do that, but, okay.
Just like 4 acres, not 12.
I didn't have anything, I was trying to avoid anything that was directly parallel to anything that was out there.
But Joe, your point also gets to the idea that that money doesn't necessarily have to be spent for the town to outright acquire parcels, right? If we're engaging large property owners and someone wants to is willing to put an agricultural restriction on their land, I think that's a superb use for
It's buying development rights rather than buying the property outright, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
One of my problems is that we always seem to wait too long and don't look ahead. And what happens if this piece of land that the town really likes, you know, we hadn't planned on it? And I think by going to the large landowners and having some idea, maybe hopefully they say, no, we're gonna hold on to all land and farm it, if it's a farm, for the rest of their life, that's fine, but I still think we should be engaged in that.
Sure.
It's economic.
It's absolutely has a prospective impact on the budget, it just doesn't have an ask, it's not like $1. So, I mean, I'll be all for scheduling the time to discuss a form for this and maybe think about who we want to have in the room with us to talk about that for one of our October or November meetings. I'm all for doing that.
And I'll be real brief on the other priorities is finding, solve our space problem. And while doing that, solving that space problem, making sure that the seniors are taken care of, that we have some kind of plan finally that we put off all these years. So those would be my top priorities.
Okay, very good. Chuck?
Joe, just on the thunder, seniors are certainly a priority. We don't have anything earmarked for town meeting right here for either land purchases. We've spoken about a land trust, and I think we whiffed a little bit here. We might have an opportunity to put some money aside. Although we don't really have a plan at this point, we haven't had that conversation. It might have been worthwhile for us to set that up.
Well, don't speak too soon. I mean, we can use this budget cycle to fund, part of the open space stabilization. In fact, that's one of my priorities to do that, both try to use some of our intended stabilization money toward open space stabilization while developing a constructive plan as to how we might eventually use it, based on some of the input that all you folks just mentioned. I also obviously would like to see continued support for the sewer project, for master plan implementation, ALS staffing, seniors you guys already mentioned, and the SRO officer too. As far as I know, I hope we're kind of capping out for a while on staff. Bonnie, I think, was wise. I'm glad she pointed out to us that she's starting to see the strain on that. But if there's one area, I'm sold on the argument from both public safety and the education needs of going forward the second SRO officer. That's a personal opinion. Chase?
At a very high level, what I'm looking for is strategic planning rather than, whack-a-mole. Here's our need for next year, and that includes, and is focused in particular specifically on some of our infrastructure needs, and that I want to make sure that we've got, the shovel-ready projects, whether that's to be ready for housing choice grants, whether that's ready to be ready for TIP funding, essentially being in a position to look forward, to understand what are we going to need today, or what are we going to need next year to put money in 2, 3, 4 years down the road in terms of grants and in terms of needs. Specifically, obviously we've already beat the sewer dead horse a little bit tonight, but that's a large component of, I think what our development is going to look like going forward, and the big part of that is the strategic aspect of it, right? We're spending money today to put ourselves in a better position, literally decades down the future, into the future as well. And that also echoes into the open space needs and the management of development concerns. And those, just like Joe alluded to, that's both a policy and a financial aspect. Right now we're talking about the financials, but I think we're remiss if we don't address the policy components of it. And then finally, the same story with the space needs. Looking at the money potentially available for us to address the library, how can we maximize the synergy there between the library and the seniors' needs and Park and Rec's needs and the town administration needs? We don't want to squander that opportunity and maximizing the potential of that. So what I'm most looking for is strategic, long-range planning manifest in a budget for next year. I will note one thing while we're, sort of moved past the discussion of level staffing and mission budgets. One thing that I'm wary of asking for a budget that shows a reduction, but what I am interested in looking at and understanding from each department is what are their lowest impact activities. I want departments to articulate that to us, because there's certainly a continuum of what each department is doing, and I understand every department is concerned with saying, well, here are the things that I'm doing that maybe are not maximizing my impact, but if I if I show my cards, then that's gonna get cut. And that's not why I'm asking for that. What I'm asking, and the reason I wanna see that, and I don't know what the best way to do that, and maybe I can kick that question to Bonnie when Cindy's done, is that, are there other things that a department can be doing with more or rearranged funding in different ways, and perhaps at the expense of some of their low-impact activities, but shifting towards higher-impact activities? I'm wary of asking for that in a way that is a major burden to our department heads, but at the same time, I want to understand what the low-impact activities are. So once Cindy's done, I do want to kick that question to Bonnie, if you don't mind.
Okay, great. Cindy?
Sure. So with respect to space needs and the seniors, as you know, Chuck and I are both on the Space Needs Working Group Committee. I think that with discussions that we've had to date with that committee, it's inevitable that we're either going to have to rent space, or if something comes available, it'd be nice to have funding available that we could jump on it if the opportunity avails itself. I'm going to use Indian Hill as an example, even though I know that's probably not feasible, but we've just had a lot of discussion about renting space or what we can do in the interim, because conceivably, it's 5 years down the road before any project comes to fruition, and really the seniors are just, as we've all said here tonight, a priority of ours. So if there was some way to relocate a department or avail ourselves to a property that's for rent, that we could just free up some space here for the seniors in some way, I'd like to have some funding set aside to be able to do that. One of the other things that was one of my priorities was the high school softball field. That field is not ADA compliant. If anybody has ever been up to softball and had an elderly family member or a coach, you gotta drag your equipment out there. It would be nice, I know that field needs work, so I'd like to somehow get that on the radar in some capacity as far as drainage and getting at least an ADA compliant walkway out to the field so that elderly and handicapped people can at least go see their granddaughter or son or daughter play. The other thing that was a priority was the Veterans Corner. I was going to save that for members' updates. That's, we now have the list compiled of veterans that need to be added to the corner. Looks like we're going to need 2 more monuments. So we're going to be looking to come before the board and talk about issuing an RFP for that project. We'd like to see it completed by November of next year. And we really think we can get there. I don't think that we're gonna need any funding from the town on that. We're hoping the CPC can help us out with the balance. But there's gonna be a more proactive fundraising campaign starting in November. So that's looking really, really good. And the other thing, I said softball, open space, space needs. And I like the idea of funding the open space fund in some capacity. We definitely have to start being more proactive on that in some regard. And we need to have a plan, so we just can't keep getting caught off guard. Foster Street was a priority of mine, but that's already in the works with what we have in plan currently, and that was it.
Okay, great.
So can I just jump in?
Sure.
I mentioned one and then you took over.
Oh, I thought you were done.
I took a pregnant pause and you jumped on it.
You could have elbowed me.
Well, we all have, I think, very similar
Yeah.
priorities. And I think that, Joe mentioned it, I mentioned it as well, as far as the seniors, taking care of the seniors and finding a way to do that. But that rolls into what Cindy and I are working on with the space needs.
Right.
And finding ways to use space differently and potentially renting space or repurposing space. It doesn't look like the opportunity to use the bathhouse down at Long Lake, doesn't look like that's gonna work out, it didn't perk, so there's some issues there. Economic development, which rolls right into the sewer, is certainly a priority of mine. Public safety, although I voted against personally, the ladder truck, public safety overriding, just as a general statement, if we need to put ALS people on, or if we need to put patrolmen on. I think that's important for us to weigh the priorities and find out whether or not now's the time to do it and how we can do it. All of these obviously have an impact financially, so overarching all of this is financial stability, and working with FinCom, with the school committee, to make sure that we're all collaborating, we're all kind of on the same page, and doing this to keep our finances in good order, which we've done a nice job of. And I'd like to retain that, maintain that, and actually improve upon it, because there is room for improvement.
All right, okay. So you've heard us individually, hopefully collectively there's some synergies there. I don't know if you can make sense of that, Bonnie.
Yeah, and I think I can incorporate some of Chase's desire to identify maybe low-impact activities, or just, departments might have a way of thinking outside of the box, but in preparing their budgets, they might not think that it would be something that would fly. So maybe just encouraging if there's some collaboration with other departments that might better align things, or duties that can be coordinated together. I think I can take care of that in the narrative, and address that to try and call those items out.
Okay.
But I'll,
And that's fine with me, to see it expressed in a narrative. My original inclination was to ask for, right now we have a level budget and more, but what about less? But I think that's probably
We used to do those years
adding
ago,
an
but-
unnecessary burden to our department heads.
Right.
Well, let me say this. This year, let's look at how effective it is in this process. And if it's not a very effective process, then perhaps next year we revisit the idea of a third budget. But
Okay. FinCom, did you get anything out of that of value?
Just one thought, listening on the space needs side. The library is number one on the list right now. And there's half a shot that they might get funding in January. If not January, more likely July. Then the town has 6 months to react to that.
Right.
So I think that either you have to try to maybe not accelerate, but make sure that the space planning is being done sort of post-haste, so that we can dovetail whatever comes forward from the library with whatever you people think the town's space needs are. Because, once they flip the switch, once the state flips the switch on the grant offer, the town has 6 months to reply. So just keep that in your, in front of your radar screen, because potentially in January, you could get a visit from the library commissioners. Or, out into next summer.
Chuck?
So we put out a request for qualifications for a professional to come in and take what we've already done, and then the work that we've done, and kind of do just that. So if the library gets funding and it is approved, what happens to the vacuum that it creates at this end of the budget?
Sure. No,
So there's gonna be a financial impact on that, so we have to decide, is it worth renovating that? Do we need to do something else to
Yep,
accommodate?
absolutely, but just,
But that's all part of that RFQ, and we're gonna be working, so we have 3 finalists. So we're meeting Wednesday to go over those, and then we're gonna set up a process to interview them and get down to one. And so we're meeting every other Wednesday right now to try to.
I just didn't hear it in any of the discussions, and
Right.
just, it's a guerrilla waiting, and it's just to watch out there, that's all.
I appreciate that, Fred.
So Darrell?
Just one thing relative to one of the items Cindy mentioned about, she talked specifically about the softball field. I think many of our fields have great accessibility issues. They all seem to be designed so that you can't easily ride a bicycle through the gate. However, if you ever tried to walk through any of those baffle gates, let alone try to find where you could get a wheelchair or somebody in crutches into the facilities, it's not unique to just the softball field. I think almost all of our other fields have an issue like that. And it might be good to think about, should we be addressing at least the basic accessibility of the fields as a priority, as opposed to just a specific field
Right.
designated as a selectmen's priority,
Right.
just an encouragement.
That's a great idea.
ADA compliance is on our list of goals, so that does fall in.
Yeah.
And as far as priority, I think the reason Cindy brought that up is because when we did, and everybody's seen the pictures of, I hope everybody's seen, or has gone up and seen the results of Chris's hard work and getting water on the fields up there and seeing what the soccer fields look like up there. At the high school. The problem with where the softball field is located is it's all grass. You'd have to go up the slopey hill with the stairs, where you have to come in from the parking lot behind the gymnasium. There is a path that'll get you to the baseball diamond, but you have to go across grass, and you have to go.
Right.
A few hundred yards to
I
get to
was
that.
careful just to specifically address the accessibility pieces versus full ADA compliance, which is a whole bigger ball of wax there. But I think the same thing exists at the baseball field, at the middle school, Shaker Lane, and the other pieces there. So just that, like I said, maybe it's rather than a specific project, if there's a way we could be thinking about
Right.
any of the incremental changes that we could do across
I
the
think the two are
board.
separate. Accessibility is certainly one that we could address
Yeah.
separately, but
Right.
the softball field at the high school is something entirely different if we're going to be investing in drainage and everything else up there, because it's wet throughout April. I mean, you can't play games on it throughout April. So I think that was, correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, I think that was what she was addressing there, but while we're at it, we need to put a path.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we can put Star Pack down pretty easily to make it more accessible.
For the seasonal issues.
Pardon?
For the seasonal issues.
Well, for getting wheelchairs,
Oh, wheelchairs,
baby
too,
carriages,
yeah.
that kind
Right,
of thing.
no, it's definitely a twofold point,
Yeah.
the drainage issue and the ADA compliance. And I just wanted to add one other thing that I didn't mention, I can't believe I didn't mention it, was a school resource officer, which I know a lot of people are here to talk about tonight, so.
I got that on the board anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so the board has, just identified items that we hope to see addressed in the budget process, but there are citizens here as well. So are there folks that would like to have input at this point? And if you heard the schedule alluded to earlier by Bonnie, there's several points where the public's input is certainly welcome as we develop the budget process. But if you want to get in now with some suggestions about how you want to see your tax dollars spent, we're all ears. Anybody? Yes?
Megan Rank, 6 Green Needles Road. I have 3 children in the Littleton school system. I have a daughter right now who's in 10th grade, who every day sees Officer Janakos in the cafeteria at lunch, interacting with the students, getting to know them. She's fully aware when he's there in the school. As a high school student that is also aware of what's going on nationally in terms of school violence, it makes her feel good when he's around. As a parent, when I come to pick up at school and I see him out there also interacting with the parents as we're picking up, it makes me feel glad that we have somebody there that's getting to know our students, that's getting to know our community, but that is also trained in how to respond if something were to happen. But I also know that 4 schools, plus Neshoba Tech and the Waldorf School, it's too much for him. I want him to focus on the high school, and we need to bring in another SRO to help with the other schools. Chief Bernard did, has mentioned a survey that was sent out to the principals and at all the schools, and they all said that they feel safer when the SRO is in their building. If I have my daughter who feels safer, and I have the principals that feel safer, and I like driving up and seeing them there, then to me it's kind of a no-brainer. We need another school resource officer. So as a parent, that's my priority. And it's late, I'm nervous. But, it's kind of a crazy time, and no one thing is going to fix the whole issue of school violence. But if we have officers that know our kids and are getting to know our kids, I think that's a big piece of this puzzle, and it's something that we can do relatively quickly. safely. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that or other subjects? Yes?
Hi, Rachel Blaine, 3 Apple Ridge Lane. I would just add, I also have 3 children in the public school system, and I can't even get into the public safety piece because it makes me too emotional. So I would argue that there's a financial impact. And so Chase, you said earlier when talking about priorities, investing now for impact 25 years down the road. There's so much research that shows that when there's an incident that happens in a town that could be prevented, and I'm not naive enough to state that having a second SRO is going to prevent any tragedy here. I know that that's not necessarily the case, but financial impact is a serious consideration. Schools that have suffered, or towns that have suffered tragedy, whether it's a school shooting or some other incident, have immediate financial slowdown. Public school enrollment dips, investment in the town dips, and there's a lot of research that backs that up. So it's not, the public safety, there's a million reasons why to do it, and it's the part that I believe in the most. But from a financial and the budget constraint world that we live in, there's a million financial reasons why we should look at it too.
Good input, thank you. Any other folks? Are you all here for support network purposes? Okay, great. All right, we did get the petition, so we were,
Laurie heard there was cookies.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I just share one thing with the board?
yeah,
About the school resource officer that was posted on social media. It was under Residents for Better Littleton by a Littleton High School grad from 2016, which I thought was pretty compelling. I asked him to be here tonight, but he's not here, so I'm just going to read this. He said, I graduated from LHS in 2016, and I can confidently say that a large majority of students were much more willing to go speak with a student resource officer than, say, the guidance counselor or the principal. From my experience, when a student goes to talk to a school staff member, it never seems easy to just have a casual conversation with a staff member. I feel that the staff within the schools have typically turned simple questions or problems into a bigger deal than what is actually going on with a student. I know several students that would never go willingly talk about things with a school staff member, but those same students would happily talk with the SRO every time he was at the school. Most students see a SRO as someone they can trust in to keep a simple situation simple and comfortably have a conversation without feeling judged. I believe another SRO will be one of the best ways this town could ever spend $80,000 a year. Not only is a SRO there for students when other staff members may not be the best fit, but you can't put a price tag on having a trained and armed officer in the school to both prevent and stop any threat that may and hopefully will never occur. So I thought that was pretty compelling.
very good. All right, well, I specifically appreciate the lateness of the hour that folks have been willing to hang in here with us. FinCom, school committee, unless there's anything else to add, we're meeting again with you again. I think the FinCom's hosting next time on the October 23rd.
Yes.
And you'll hopefully be better hosts than us and provide cookies as has been requested.
No cookies.
No cookies, all right. Okay.
Cookies next time, Laurie.
How come we never meet at a school?
Well, we haven't done that often, but we certainly could, right?
We'd have cookies.
Perhaps, he says, yes. Perhaps. All right, well, why don't we get back to our remaining articles? We had 3 of them, right? And then see if we can get through the rest of this agenda. We were at the article formerly known as 10.
You actually have a motion under this agenda.
Oh, we do? All right, I apologize for that. And what is that motion? Where is it?
It's number 5, and...
If you've got it, I already turned the page on it. So. All right.
Level?
Yeah, the 2.
Mind if he's already got it here?
Oh, wait.
I'm having difficulty.
Well, Chuck, he's got it right here. Have it.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go.
You have a vote?
What
You buy a new computer for the next one.
I thought we were doing both.
I don't know what we're doing.
No, it's both. It's A and B.
Yes,
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to request 2 department budget scenarios be prepared for fiscal year 2020, mindful of Selectmen's adopted goals. A, level staffing required services, budget prepared with the same staffing/required services levels as FY19, inclusive of increases to support only any steps in salary schedule adjustments that may be contractually due on the existing salary schedules. Expenses to be level funded, sorry, Mr. Fontanella, at the FY 2019 amount. B, mission budget. Budget prepared with the staffing levels as the department head appointing authority feels necessary to provide sufficient service to the community. And any enhanced staffing or expense levels must be submitted with full documentation justifying why the increase is necessary and the expected outcome of the increased service. Increased service, decreased public safety incidents, additional revenues generated, et cetera. Period.
Okay.
That's the motion.
Second. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Good, we're off and rolling in the budget process. Moving back to the articles. Article formerly known as 10, now 11, correct? Right, the accessory apartment bylaw changes for the planning board. Members, do we want to take a position on this? And if so, what would it be? Anybody feel strongly about it?
I'd actually like to, they voted on Thursday.
Yeah.
I'd like to actually reach out to a couple of them and
Okay.
better understand it personally.
I'm in the same boat. I don't yet,
Grasp.
unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the hearing.
Right, so.
I'm not in a position, it's not that I'm opposed to it, I just don't understand it effectively.
I actually, that's kind of where I come from. I'm not having had a presentation, I'm missing the nuances, might be missing the nuances of what's changed here.
So I'd like to either.
Is that okay with the rest?
Yeah,
of
that's
it? We
fine.
may end up taking a vote on it, just won't make the mailing, right, Keith?
That's right, it'll say,
Well, it won't say anything
right.
on it, us.
Yeah, yeah, it'll say, planning board recommends.
Right, okay.
I'll make a recommendation tonight.
Yeah, we can do it then if we need to, or earlier if we want to. The zoning amendment on the amended senior residential development bylaw. I'm just gonna say here, I don't believe I have any conflict that would be triggered by this, but since I do abut a proposed project, I'm not gonna speak on this or vote on it, so.
I think each of these have been amended on Thursday, kind of falling in the same, let's table them until, that's, I don't feel educated enough to make a recommendation at this point.
It's stopping him this time, but he's withholding.
Well, as I said, I'm not gonna speak on this one, but I'll defer whatever.
I'm the same, 11 and 12, I view as a package.
Yeah.
Joe, Cindy, you guys?
I've been, with the planning board, yeah, I've been, going to the meetings and everything.
But the
yeah.
suggestion is that the other members of the board haven't got enough info on it yet.
I'm fine, but I fully appreciate your need to get more information
Okay.
before we vote, so that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Unless you want to educate us.
I mean, they made some changes, I wish they had pieced them all together. It's a little,
Just try to follow, I haven't watched the
Right.
the meeting, but trying to follow the email strings, I just think it's not.
I don't think they were really significant changes. It was just more, being more specific about areas that we're looking for. And I'm not talking about the accessory dwelling, the senior residential, just more that it was, we're looking for areas of the Common, the Point, Taylor Street, Harvard Avenue.
Right, and the rest, my understanding is
It's
the rest
re-
of it is just.
It's really not that
adjustments or
different,
adjustments.
yeah, so.
I'd rather beat that, we still have MS4, right?
Right, and you want to take I think you do want to take a recommendation on Article 9.
Yeah, well, let me just confirm, is the board intending then on the, what is now Article 12, the senior residential, we're not gonna be taking a motion, or do you wanna take a motion on the basis of that discussion?
I'm not ready. I still need to
11
do
and 12,
my.
I prefer to watch the movie, eat some popcorn, read the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Get the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, the movie's different than the book. Are you okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay, fine.
absolutely.
All right, then we'll move on to that, and then there's the former Article 12, current Article 8, is it? 9, all right, damn it. No, I'll never get that one. Which is the ever-popular alcohol article.
We have a marijuana article, we have an alcohol.
Yeah, right,
article.
yeah.
Hey, give a storm.
We got a lot of problems.
But otherwise, it's
We got
where's the casino
the
going?
rehab article at the end, yeah. Cindy, it was your pitch initially.
Sure, so, yeah, so I was approached by the boosters, I'm a member of the boosters, but also
Boosters?
the Littleton Athletic Boosters
Oh, there's a Z
Association.
in there.
There's no Z.
Boosters.
There's no Z.
I didn't have a Z, it's late.
Booze.
Boosters.
He's very
I think he's onto something.
It's Gideon.
He does, yeah.
Honestly.
After 8:30.
But coincidentally, I was also approached by the library trustees and Park and Rec. And
Community
just,
farm, I mean, there's a lot of
there's
organizations.
a lot of
that would-
organizations, and
yeah. A lot of trucks.
just to help with fundraising endeavors, but it also would help kind of build and collaborate with local business owners and just give more options
Drink.
as far as fundraising and venues to hold a fundraiser, so.
I want to do a touch of truck day.
Truck, right, not Chuck?
Yeah, let's try. Tea.
Only in Cambridge.
All right, is the board in a position of taking
It's
a...
not fair.
One important, I think one important point to note there is that it's not carte blanche, right?
No.
Board of
Correct.
Selectmen still
Right.
holds
Right.
the permitting authority,
Yeah, the language is pretty specific.
Right,
in case someone is still watching.
right.
Or in case, Chris, you want to do something down at the highway garage, you know.
I move the board of selectmen
You could have a fundraiser for the,
recommend.
for the additional
Oh, right,
vacancy for the
right,
building.
right.
Second,
Motion's made and seconded then to recommend Article 9, formerly Article 12. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, public input. No public. That's easy. They go on. Member updates. Starting, Cindy, I'll start with you. How's that?
one thing I wanted, well, I already gave you an update on the Veterans Corner. One thing I wanted to ask that was talked about at the last Space Needs meeting, that we've talked about actually at a couple meetings, is identifying files here at Town Hall that can now be scanned, shredded, and disposed of under the municipal document retention schedule. I wanted to ask the board if they would be agreeable to asking the town departments to identify those documents, so we can just see what's there, and then make a decision about how we want to move forward. This sort of ties into the going paperless component 2 of my goals, but I just am curious to see how many files are around that we can move out. And not that it's gonna generate a huge amount of space, but it might make some offices more comfortable.
Yep.
And we just don't know until we actually can get a visual of what is here. So I just wanted to see if the board was in favor of doing that.
Is that something that's appropriately looked at through the committee that you guys are working on? Since it's a
Well, I wanted to
space-related
talk to
issue?
you about it, and then we can actually revisit it at our meeting this week. But I wanted to just run it by the board first instead of having our committee do it and not having
Yeah.
your input.
I'm willing to entertain a proposal on it, but is the, apologies if I missed part of this, but is the intent to capture most of it digitally or just to toss a lot of this stuff?
It depends on what this,
Right.
the intention from discussions we've had is to capture most of it digitally,
Yeah.
and retain it. And that's something that I've been working on with Anthony as far as getting a system in here or
Yeah,
figure
because
out the
that would be a
mechanism for
significant
that.
capital request that you need to
Right.
bring
Right.
forward in
Right,
the future.
there you go.
We
Well-
had applied for a grant a few years ago, it was like $250,000, didn't get a
But
Well,
until we know what we're
Then
looking
we can get a
at,
demo.
like, we just don't know
We can get a demo.
how many documents
Yeah.
we're talking about.
You know, I think since you guys are already engaged in that space needs thing, and it definitely has an impact on space, it's a proper place to start a, a serious
Okay,
discussion. on it.
I just
think
wanted
so,
to run it by,
I mean, that's not like a blanket yes, but it's like, yes, it should be looked at, you know.
okay.
So let me just jump in. We do have some funding that was earmarked by town meeting for the space needs group to be expended on
Right.
things that would impact short-term, long-term outcomes. So this could be, we could do a pilot program, with one department, it could be the town administrator's office. We could try to implement it in one area. So
Hire small people.
Exactly. Small people.
Don't hire me.
Okay.
All right. All right, so we'll be awaiting a potential recommendation from you folks.
Okay, perfect. And then I just want to let you know, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees, it's such a mouthful, had their first meeting on September 11th. So Bartlett Harvey's the chairman, I am the vice chair, and Mark Montnari's the clerk. So I'm just giving you an update on that.
Terrific. What's your opening kitty for that? How big is the trust right now?
Nothing.
Zero.
Oh,
Zero.
I thought we needed to establish it because there was money waiting.
Well, if the planning board ever
Releases it.
receives the payment in lieu of
Right.
for an affordable unit,
That's
then
okay.
those funds would go into.
Right, that's why it had to be
Would that
open.
include Cooper or not? Is that, would the Cooper money go there? No?
No, they didn't come in under that.
Okay.
Now, we can put money in.
But you could, the community preservation housing funds could be deposited directly into that trust fund. But you can bring that to the May. I've got a note to put that in the May town meeting.
Okay.
Leaving a lot of notes.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna have to sit down and go through your notes. Chase, was that it, by the way, Cindy?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Chase?
One, well, I guess two committee updates. One, the town administrator, can't ever remember if it's search or screening committee task anyway. All, our approved minutes have been up online. I've circulated those minutes to you folks to keep you abreast of what's going on. At our last meeting, which you haven't seen the minutes of yet, we elected to hire Fred Ryan and his associate Rick White to assist us in the hiring process. That will involve something akin to the police chief's assessment center, obviously very different scenarios in some contexts.
Really? No guns.
No guns. No guns. And then upcoming activities, and with their help, we anticipate getting out the posting by the end of this week. We've got a draft posting that Ann did a really nice job putting together. They're coming in on Wednesday to help us tighten it just a touch. And then the posting should go out, 30-day posting period on that, and then the real fun starts. In the interim, what we're going to be doing is meeting with department heads, another fun night for Chris, no doubt, to understand.
Before 3, right?
What was that?
Before 3.
Before 3, that's when I work best.
That's what I think.
To understand what
It's
the.
not gonna be 3 for another few hours.
Yeah, you're right. Right, Chris is just sleeping. To understand what our department heads need from that, because we're a committee comprised of members of the community and elected boards, we felt like there was a really significant need there to understand, the department heads and what they need from the town administrator as well. So each department head is going to come in and, has been invited, whether they elected to come in or not.
I did see that email.
Up to them.
It's got the red flag next to the email, I just haven't responded to it.
Good, and I'll pester you. She's fine. Okay, so that was the administrative thing. The a couple other minor things. You'll probably cover this, Paul, but the police department has an open house on the 29th from 11 a.m. to 2.
What came up in the minutes, just before you walked in.
Oh, okay.
We covered that.
So that was one. Number 2 is the Conservation Trust is hosting a hike at Oak Hill. Shortly after that, I get to assist the land steward, Bill Brown, who actually knows that property in and out. So please come to that. And then the last thing was the fire department indulged me and let me burn down the building.
Oh, you did?
Oh, you did that?
You put the mask in the gear? Oh, I've got
mask
them.
and gear, and I actually got
It's
to
a little
start
scary,
one of the
isn't it?
fires. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, crawl on the
amazing
floor
how
on the
fast-
hose. And that's
30, 45 seconds. That building is 700 degrees in there.
Wow.
And there were no books, there were no furniture.
Right, just to be up there, a couple of people, no furniture? Okay.
Curtains, nothing.
Yeah, nothing, and it was
Shell.
still overwhelming very quickly. So.
You have pictures?
I have some pictures, nothing, wasn't exactly carrying my
Your kids
phone
come down
around.
to watch?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool.
GoPro.
Just don't try this at home, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right, anything else?
No.
That's cool, good. Brett?
Sure, so, one thing I wanted to mention is, during the terrible gas leaks and explosions up in Andover, Lawrence and North Andover, our public safety, kicked in, and provided mutual aid to the police and fire. I just want to take my hat off to them and say, thank you very much, and it's that's what Littleton's all about, community and helping out, right? So the other thing I wanted to mention is for the elections coming up on November 6th, that's the general election. Voter registration deadline is October 17th, so just give people a heads up on that. Also, 1 year anniversary for Alumni Field was last week. So the 22nd was our grand opening, and so it's been getting a lot of use. The lights are probably still on out there right now. There's some youth sports going on. It's been used on Sundays. I've been down watching the adult flag football. There's all kinds of stuff going on. It's awesome. It's really buzzing over there, and it still looks very good. Chris's guys are doing a great job maintaining it, and Mike is managing through the school department. Lastly, and I just wanted to extend condolences on behalf of the town to the Pegasic family. Littleton lost a woman that epitomized what Littleton is all about, and she truly was a caring, loving individual, and was there in time of need for anyone who needed a shoulder to cry on, or a cookie, or whatever it was. Denise was a wonderful woman, and my heart, and I think I can speak for all of us, all of our hearts go out for Ivan and his boys, Michael and Matthew, and Denise's family.
Denise, of course, worked for the town for a period of time, Park and Rec, and she was the friendliest face you could want to run into, and her husband Ivan, of course, is a former member of this board, so we share your grief there. Okay, you done, Joe? Joe?
Well, some of the things I was going to bring up is already mentioned, but I do want to mention what you had talked about with our fire department, police department going up to Andover and North Andover and Lawrence, and it goes back to the fire truck again. But I saw some of the different trucks that were there, and what the difference was between a bucket truck and a stick truck was tremendous. That showed in some of those other ones where the firemen had to climb up the ladder to do things. When you get that bucket truck, they were right up there if they had to rescue people and out. But that was that. The other thing, on the real positive side, I just want to wish my granddaughter JoJo happy birthday. She turned 2.
Tell Kim, don't worry about it. It's the terrible 3s, not the terrible 2s. She's got another year.
All right. I'd also like to give a shout out to the officers, Casey and Camello, who represented the town of Littleton in stylish fashion, showing up at Tom O'Day's funeral in Sarasota, Florida, in the Littleton Cruiser. And thank God nothing happened, but I'll tell you, it was, I wouldn't do that for just anybody, but Tom was a immense figure in the town, both with the police department and the service and town government, and the family greatly appreciated, and the people in Sarasota, I guess, took particular note of that too. The other item I mentioned, scheduling item, tomorrow night is the annual meeting of the Littleton Business Association. And as they always do, James Kennedy is allowing an update on the sewer project, so that's why, Keith, I gotta pick up those trifolds from you. We'll circulate those documents and begin the sales pitch process. We'll continue it anyways with new material, PR process. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I just mention something? Bonnie had touched on the school resource officer position.
Yes.
At the beginning of the meeting. I don't think we really discussed it. We kind of put it to the side and said we'd revisit it.
Well, I think it's going to be in the police department's budget request, right?
This is the one for fiscal year 19 to incorporate it into their budget.
Right.
I don't know, I think it was anticipated we'd talk about it tonight as a board.
Well, I put it out there, but we didn't get a whole lot of bite back from the FinCom or the, you're right.
I don't know, I think it kind of went over everybody's head.
So I was under the impression that it was for FY 2020. That's what everybody, because I reached out to the Mikey Cruz letter that mentioned 2020.
Yeah.
Petition said FY 2020.
Yeah,
There was some discussion a couple of weeks ago.
Right, so they had written that petition before we had our presentation. I don't know if you were here with Chief Pinard. So at the end of the chief's presentation, I had asked, would it be possible to fund that position this year? So we had given Bonnie direction to come up with a funding mechanism to incorporate that position this year, just so that we don't have to wait a whole nother school year to fund that position.
Well, the final motions, Keith, on that would, we could do right up to game time, right?
Right,
So
Right,
we,
with FinCom.
Yeah,
and we could do it on the 23rd at our
The key-
joint meeting with
The key
FinCom.
is, all we've identified is what the additional cost is. You've not identified what you're gonna cut from the current budget. in order
Right.
to pick- in
Or from
order to
whose budget
replace
it's
it,
coming
right,
from.
Whose budget?
Right.
Because we're
How
in
big are
balance
we
right
gonna
now. We're in balance right now for fiscal 19. You're about to set the tax rate.
Right.
Okay.
Another month, and if you want to, and you can only, under your policies, you can only use recurring revenues,
Right.
not one-time revenues.
Yeah, so the fact that we have money on hand to finish the year, it does not, yeah.
You
doesn't-
have
doesn't
to,
work.
you have,
Doesn't- wouldn't
you have to
work with
decide
our
where
policies.
you want to cut the budget. You can do that, you can have those discussions. You've got two opportunities. October 15th, your next regular meeting. If you skip, I'd talk to Paul, I'd recommend, I think you got everything done tonight that you need
Right.
to do for
We don't really
the town
need to
meeting
next week.
report.
Okay.
The rest of the stuff,
Okay.
and if you met on October 15th, that would be soon enough to.
Right,
take care
well,
of
it
other
was
business.
it was a cost sharing.
Wasn't sure how you're gonna react. Okay, I'm gonna-
I'm just reading from what Bonnie wrote. It was a cost-sharing option if the school committee was agreeable to, and I'm regretful because Kelly Clenchy was here and we didn't address it with him in the room.
Well, you have to.
We break our
I
own
would
policies
say
if we
you
do
need
it
to-
without finding a continuous revenue stream for a recurring position, or a recurring
Well,
expense.
I think for next year is different, for 2020 is different scenario. This was just to incorporate it this year.
Yeah, but once you incorporate it now, you're presuming that it's in next year's budget.
No, I know. No, I.
And I support it, I just thought,
But you need to get, and you've got two opportunities. You've got October 15th and you've got the joint meeting on October 23rd. Either of those, you could hammer out an agreement with FinCom
Right.
and the school committee, or not, on whose budget is going to get cut to pay for these additional. for the
Right, so she
additional
had
positions.
written, what did she say? The town budget 21,000 and the school budget 21,000
can you
for
follow
this
up
year.
with her perhaps outside of this meeting, and we can,
Yeah.
we'll put it on the agenda for the 15th, and then, if necessary, the 23rd with the FinCom if we go forward with it.
Okay,
All right?
That would be the best way to address it.
Okay.
Is to, yeah.
all right.
They're not in the rules.
Agendarize it.
No, no, I totally understand. I just want to bring it to your attention.
We can support it with the school fully funding it.
Sure.
Sure.
That's,
Yeah.
You're not here to defend yourself.
All right, so schedule
Okay.
10:15.
We've tried that sort of thing before, it never runs
Whose
well.
class is
No.
that? Whose class has been in?
All right,
Okay.
moving right along. 8:15, yeah, it's almost
It's
8:15.
It's 8:15 somewhere.
It's
Right.
in Greenfield, it's.
Probably in Greenfield, right?
Yeah, or in Athol, rather.
MS4 stormwater update, file notice of intent. All right, any prep you need to give us, Keith?
Well, I
or is
will
this-
say that there actually is a deadline on this,
Okay.
October 1st.
Oh, 10 o'clock.
Yeah, October 1st, by
DEP wants
October
their stuff by
1st, the notice of intent on the so-called MS4 stormwater permit needs to be filed, and so we have been working with our stormwater team, led by, I would say, led by Emily Sherman.
definitely led by Emily.
Kind on, because without Emily's guidance, we'd be in violation, I'm sure. So this is the permit that was delayed by a year. It's the so-called 2016 permit, which was to have taken effect on July 1 of 2017.
Yep.
It was delayed for a year. It kicked in on July 1, 2018, and we are proceeding. So I will turn it over to Emily for a quick.
Yeah, I
I
want
can
to
do
go
the
through
click. I
it.
can do the clicks.
Do the
Hope
clicking.
you don't have a long commute, we apologize for keeping you
No,
waiting.
that's
but-
okay. Actually, I spoke to
She's only
the
half as far away
I went
as
to the
I am.
Concom before this,
Ah,
because they
oh.
wanted to hear about it, and actually they had a lot of questions, so it was good. Okay, so you did the intro already, so we clicked through that one. And we were here actually 2 years ago talking about bylaws, and we went through this very slide. I included it again just to refresh everyone's memory about stormwater pollution being an issue, but we can skip through this one if you'd like.
So the stormwater program, again, we're in good company with about 260 municipalities across Massachusetts, plus a bunch of our friends in New Hampshire, and it's a national program as well, but EPA Region 1 regulates Mass and New Hampshire. And you can see the urbanized area in Littleton there, the red hatching. There's a couple of little pieces of Littleton where the program doesn't need to be applied, but, you know, realistically, it's hard to just, you know, stop the sweeper at that line and.
We've
so-
mapped and stuff the whole town as
Yeah.
if the whole town was included in the permit.
Exactly, so go ahead, Keith. So, just to recap, since 2003, we've been following these 6 minimum control measures, and actually you had a handout in your packet that also explains the 6 categories of compliance. I won't belabor that, but quickly, public education and public participation are the first 2, which is part of the reason why we wanted to do a public meeting tonight, just to be on TV and get the word out. Illicit discharge, that middle one, is probably the most important and the most onerous requirement. That's what Chris was mentioning. We've done a lot of mapping. That's in there. Checking all the outfalls for pollution is part of that requirement. Having an illicit discharge plan is in there. So we've done quite a bit of work. The 4th and 5th minimum control measures, construction, site runoff control, and post-construction, that rolls up into local code and bylaws, and we did that 2 years ago. And then last is good housekeeping and pollution prevention in municipal operations. So those are the categories, plus this last category for impaired waters is making sure your water bodies in Littleton making sure we're taking steps towards meeting Clean Water Act designated uses for all the water bodies. So specific things for that the Concom was pretty interested in. So go ahead, Keith, you can go to the next. So quick update since we were last here. We've been doing a lot of really good stuff. I won't go through all of this, but I think like my favorite highlight is what we did with the mapping, is that we realized that the mapping needs were actually a lot more than what we had originally anticipated and budgeted for. So we hired interns this past summer, and we trained them, we gave them a manual, we set them up with an iPad, and they went and mapped everything.
Basically, what we thought was gonna
Right.
take 2 years, we got done in 1
You
summer.
gave them things to do.
More.
You thought it would take them a week, and then they got it done in a day.
Basically.
That was our
And you
problem,
gave them
yeah.
more things to do.
Yeah, what we thought was gonna take 2 years took them 2 months.
Yeah.
They kept coming back,
And it was
we're done with that.
Correct. It wasn't just,
And they found a way to play Fortnite on the iPad.
well, I'm sure they did. Well, they found a way to have it run over by a car, but
They did?
yeah, it got run over.
Yeah.
But we actually, yeah, we had them do massive amount. They just kept working themselves out of work.
Yeah, and Natalie Konski, who's on my team, is actually a Littleton resident, and so she oversaw the interns with Chris and got them trained, and he had a dashboard to watch what they were doing on his desktop. So that was a huge success. So we're able on the first page of the NOI to certify all the outfalls are indeed now mapped electronically. We did previously have a combination of paper and electronic. So that's the biggest thing. And we're doing a lot of other good work, and they're participating in the Northern Middlesex Collaborative, so they get a lot of resources there. Keith, go ahead. So what we need to do is certify this notice of intent application that's got to go to EPA by October 1, so next Monday. The NOI application is, I don't have my permits in my bag. We take the permit, we boil it down into the very, very basic control measures that EPA wants to see. It's very minimalist. There's not really a lot of room to change anything, and we list who's responsible, and we have assigned every outfall in town with the water body that it's discharging to, and that goes into EPA. And we're asking we need the Board of Selectmen to certify that before it goes in, and I have a couple, if Keith doesn't have it, I have 2 pages to sign for that. We also did an endangered species check, historic properties, everything is buttoned down with the NOI.
I got the cover letter for the
Oh,
chairs.
is that's the letter, the delegation of authority letter?
Yeah.
This one.
Yes, so that's the other thing, is if you're comfortable signing that letter, that allows us to submit administrative reports to have either the town administrator sign in the future. You have to sign the NOI, no matter what, anytime there's an NOI, but for future annual reports or for Like this document, the stormwater management plan document, it makes more sense probably for Chris to sign that. That letter allows the right technical.
Designate.
It designates them to sign that. I don't know what's next, there might be a couple more. Yeah, so this is all posted for, yep, public comment. This plan, so there's, actually, you can keep clicking, one more key. We'll get to the plan eventually. Okay, so that's one of the maps, that's another map. And then finally, this plan, we have a year to do the full plan, but this is already drafted, so we're gonna be sending this to our internal working group, and then it'll be posted online for public comment. I think people might be interested in this more so than the form. And I think that's
it?
I think that's it.
All right, go back to the motion.
The quick version.
Well, first, let's just see, board members,
Just one quick question. Any idea how this changes if and when Mass DEP takes over Nifty's permitting?
If and when, yeah, because that just died the last legislative session.
Right, yeah, but it seems to keep coming up, and it seems like it, well, I don't know, maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to fund it, so they keep coming back at it with half the funding needed. There's a study to, I think it was gonna take 13 million a year, and they said, well, you could have close to 5. I don't know that, it's gonna take a long time for delegation to be finalized, because DEP will then need to staff up, do all their regulations and policies, and get it equivalent to the EPA program.
So we're gonna be into another permit cycle before that.
Absolutely. I don't see that happening and being up and running for a while. And even if it does, to be perfectly honest, we're at the federal baseline, because EPA is administering the program, and we have the federal baseline permit for this program. Everywhere else in the country is doing more.
Well, I guess that was the nature of my question and concern, is if in the MS4 context, you are reading the tea leaves at all about what additional Mass DEP may require. But your point that it's probably a whole permitting cycle away.
It's a long ways away. And what the state is working on right now is updating like the Mass Stormwater Handbook, which is good for us because it takes away some of these requirements for the local code will get done at the state level, so.
Okay.
well, he's our only environmental engineer on the board, so, I mean,
I'd ask one question. Dereliction of duty if I don't.
That's right.
Otherwise, it actually is a very nice, well done
I will
submission.
say that I believe this past year was the third and final year of the money that we get from.
Yeah, we were getting 100,000 a year from the Clean Lakes
So just
committee.
so you're aware,
So we
gotta
haven't,
find money somewhere.
yeah, we haven't spent all the 300.
We haven't spent it all, but I'm just going
We've been
forward.
putting aside three.
There is gonna be at
So
some
there will
point.
come a time, and in the multi-year CIP, there will be,
It won't be this year, I
there'll be
believe. we
future
have enough.
requests for, well, I would think by 2021.
Yes.
But not 2020. We
We'll
can
be
live off
requesting
the
funds for-
fumes for
Correct.
2020.
Depending on how much Emily charged us for tonight.
You got an extra hour and a half.
Double dipped.
The interns have saved the budget.
You're right, the interns did help dramatically, so.
Speaking of that, how is the data that they gathered? How, I mean, where are we? I mean, obviously, you got all the data, but how do we look, and how do our outfalls, and how does everything look? Is there?
It's
Our
good, I mean, it was
infrastructure?
accurate, it was, I mean, what we found, you know, there's a few handful of them that they either couldn't find or whatnot, but most likely the pond was too high, so they couldn't locate the outfall, stuff like that. But, I mean, basically, they compile it all, we had Time Bond review it, they came up with questions, they went back out, confirmed or, you know, whatnot. I mean, it's there, it's top notch.
Are there capital, I know that there's funding in the environmental bond bill for climate resiliency things. Are there specific, and we're certified as an MVP community.
Right, okay.
Now, so, and the next round would be for capital projects. So are there things that are on that are our responsibilities under this program that we
Is
could
it
apply
5
for
BMTs we have to put in this film?
MVP capital funding in the future?
Yeah.
Let's look at that. anyway.
We should look at that, and I
Let's look
jotted
at
down a note to make sure that this is.
There's certain requirements of this permit, like we have to do, I believe, 5 retrofits to create BMPs or something.
You don't have to build them, you have to find 5 locations.
Oh,
and
5.
By year 6, build one demonstration project, but you could do that earlier, so it would make sense
I always like
to
to
do
be
a
ahead of the
grant.
curve,
Yeah,
so-
it would make sense to do a
Yeah,
grant.
it doesn't, the feds don't require us to use our money, we can go and apply. for
Yeah,
state
and so
grant.
we've
Yeah.
got 319 funding in some instances
Yeah.
for that if you do it ahead of time. Anytime you do it early, it's more fundable.
Are there any of our pieces of town property, infrastructure, highway, light and water, that have anything that we can spend additional monies on to bring closer to compliance? Do we have any that are out of compliance or?
Like our actual facilities?
Yeah, our actual facilities.
I don't know.
I have that plan drafted. I haven't finished it, but no, they're not out of compliance at
No,
the highway
everything's
facility.
okay.
No, we have a stormwater pollution prevention plan for that.
Only
we have-
most of our stormwater flows into B&Ps, so,
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
Is
the
that-
building's not that old, so.
okay.
Yeah, where I'm a little bit concerned about the future is like wherever so the outfall sampling is complete except for 2 outfalls that we couldn't get to because it kept raining. So we have to go back and get them. But we do have to sample for phosphorus, and that's been coming up a little bit high all over. So there's gonna be a phosphorus source identification report at some point that's gonna fit into that retrofit assessment, and there may be some BMPs needed for that.
We have a lot of these little random lots of land that the town owns all over town, so they might be good opportunities, kind of like what we did down by the lake.
Yeah,
Took
right,
a
a little
piece.
constructed wetland here that,
So, yeah, I mean, so I think, that'll be moving forward. We can kind of look at these pieces of land that frankly are just dumping grounds for all the neighbors, so we can actually retrofit it into something that'll be beneficial stormwater-wise to the town.
Or senior housing.
They're too small, and there's no sewer.
All right, are we ready for a vote? Is that almost a motion?
something.
Yeah.
Well,
Ready?
yeah, oh, you ready to go?
I'm
Okay,
ready.
All right.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to authorize filing with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection of the Town of Littleton's Notice of Intent for coverage under the 2016 Massachusetts Small MS4 Municipal Service Storm Sewer System General Permit, which became effective July 1st, 2018.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Safe travels, you
And
too?
do we need to discuss the letter delegating signatory authority?
You okay with, staff typically has been
Date this too?
filing them, so, but you feel better with the delegation letter?
Well, yeah, you've been signing the annual reports.
Right.
And Chris hasn't been able to sign anything. But I think some of the technical documents,
Yeah.
he's probably the most appropriate person to sign them, like the SWIP.
Keep your
You do know why we didn't want Chris signing stuff, right?
I can't comment
Have
on
you
that.
seen the crayons in his office?
It's ridiculous.
Okay, board members, I just noticed I had a text here from planning board member Anna Houston, who was must have been watching our meeting.
No, Rob was.
Oh, Rob was, and I heard us discussing the planning board.
So you gotta get down there.
We already moved on from
Yeah,
that.
we'll be
I'll
back
let
on
Keith-
October 15th.
Are we?
You
We're all
can-
set.
You're all set, thank
Yeah.
you.
You can scan me that.
I will, yeah, thank you so much.
If you
So,
wanted
Mr.
to,
Chair, I understand that, so if there are any questions I can help answer, I'd be happy to, but otherwise, I don't know what the appropriate move would be for you all to move forward on the 2 bylaws that are on the warrant. So, if I can help answer
I think
the
we just,
questions.
it was new enough information, and at least a couple of members stated.
When are we going to print? 29th?
It goes next Tuesday. So I think, but you'll meet again on October 15th, and that will be,
For an insert?
that will be enough time. Because the booklet that goes out says that it's recommended by the planning board.
Right.
So that's.
That's what the public's gonna be
Board of
looking for.
Selectmen,
We're not gonna be
frankly,
opposed to it.
Until the last set of articles on housing and marijuana, you never opined on
Right.
zoning articles. So-
Okay, well, I just wanted to be here to help answer.
Yeah, so if anyone does have a particular question, I think it's gonna be a case where we're all gonna go back and reread our documents and then individually call you up and say, what the heck does this
As
mean?
early in the evening as we can.
Right.
Well, it was on the agenda early at 7, and
So we're right on
a
time.
couple of
Right.
us were in another meeting, so I figured, oh, that's already done. All right, well, I just wanted to make sure I was available.
Appreciate it.
While we're rehashing things that we discussed in,
Well, we really weren't, but.
I'm well aware.
Chase is
Articles,
going to.
but I am going to, because this is our last opportunity to consider pulling it off.
Okay,
This is the transfer of ownership of Durkey Farm parcels.
right.
While I've been sitting here, and it obviously isn't official communication from Conscom, my understanding is they have some significant concerns with not just the issues that you and I raised, but other elements of the,
Okay. This isn't actually our last opportunity to withdraw it, right?
well,
Just
it's
to
our
keep it
last
from the book.
opportunity to withdraw it and not have it in the booklet.
Right.
Do you want her here for this one?
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
planning
yeah,
board too.
I mean,
Well, this would, yeah, the planning board, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, with Turkey, the A and B.
Turkey Farm A and B,
So,
that the town would
here's-
be responsible.
Here's,
for.
just so everyone's on the exact same page, here's what I understand from
Conscom.
Conscom, is that, I guess, full disclosure from Julie Rupp.
Right.
Green International, who is the peer reviewing consultant, has issues. Conscom's worried that the town will get stuck repairing basins that already don't drain properly. In other words, they drain onto parcels A and B, and unless those are operating effectively, we could possibly get stuck with the literal downstream issues associated with those.
But who put the article on the warrant? Because if it wasn't us.
Planning board gave it to us.
So,
Okay, so
we
we can
really
pull it
can't
off
pull it off
Okay.
anyway, right?
But we will formulate a recommendation
Right.
or action.
And if between now and town meeting, those issues have been resolved, then the planning board may well want to withdraw that one for
Is
now
that
too.
something that has been in a letter that was
No,
sent?
it's-
My understanding
Well, it
is
happened tonight.
that literally happened.
It did?
moments
They were
ago.
meeting upstairs while we were meeting down here.
So there were a lot of meetings going on.
There were a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Chase was watching it streaming while he was.
Yeah.
He was doing something over there, I don't know what he was doing.
That's what all the kids are doing these days.
So we should hopefully get something soon.
Yeah, exactly, but I mean, I will tell you from my perspective, we, the town, have been fighting issues with the permitting and function of those basins pretty much since the day where they were constructed. So-
And Chase made this point earlier too, we, the town, again, have an interest that we don't want to be taking property if there's remedial measures that come with it. You know, we want those to be done before we own it.
Right. So
But-
we don't take on the problems.
Right.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the developer would love it if we did.
Right. Not a bad guy, but not a fool either.
Wait, well,
They aren't usually.
Well, I don't know, I've worked for a couple.
So for so on the balance of the agenda, I'd suggest you do the minutes and then go home.
Well, what about the community
Well,
compact
I
cabinet?
think we can schedule, it's not time sensitive, so we
Okay.
could schedule it for our next meeting
The 15th?
on the 15th.
All right, just to recap, when Keith and I were discussing, there were like literally 2 items, neither was time sensitive on the first, so our recommendation, the rest of the board, is you've been very indulgent the past couple of weeks, we don't need to meet on the first.
Right. Especially where it's only a week away.
Right.
We could use the break.
Keith just doesn't want to.
I could use the break because I'm here all alone this
Oh,
week.
that's true, yeah, no Anthony around,
You
yeah.
know, so,
This is not a Disney World trip, what is it this time?
no, it's ICMA.
Oh, he's at
Yeah,
ICMA,
he could
where is
go
it
and
this
get-
year?
It's in Baltimore. He could go and get my 40-year award, but they're gonna mail it to me.
Okay, so we're not gonna do Anna, we'll see you,
Thanks for
thanks for
coming
coming
in.
down.
Thank you.
Bye, Anna, thank you.
Yeah, we can discuss the community.
Meanwhile, Rob's sitting at home with his feet up, sipping a little something or other, and he sends you out, right?
He said, you better get down there, I think they have some questions for you.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Bye, Anna.
Start
Okay,
going on
minutes.
a delayed basis.
Right. Minutes of the 10th, we do have minutes taken by Sue Raymond. I liked them.
I didn't have any comments.
No. She did make a point of putting in there, Paul Glaving, nothing to add. Boy, that was like, geez.
It jumps out at you.
Well,
Her name in there, though.
she knows that
Spacing.
she's supposed to put your name in.
At least
often.
that's not commentary, though. She could have said nothing substantive.
Right. I used to coach her son in Little League, but
You don't need to add anything.
I guess not picking him for the All-Star team finally come back on it.
Goes without saying.
A lot of words, not so much that.
None of that, whatever. At least it wasn't blah, blah, blah. you
Yada, yada, yada.
know, right. Okay, a motion, did we have one?
that.
Yeah.
Move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the meeting minutes of September 10th, 2018.
Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Another motion?
Move that we adjourn?
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Great. Thank you, folks.